What's your
And
speculation?
was the purpose served? Two groups have always been, there's a group that has been saying open up for political and economic reasons. And then there's the other group that's been saying, look, for medical reasons, we're still fighting a medical emergency. And for others, maybe commercial reasons, let's continue with the measures. And it has been very clear that those two groups are at loggerheads.
There's a third group.
There's a third one.
The Mwananchi. The government can give all the guidelines it likes, but the Mwananchi will interpret it as they see fit. Yes, just like they interpreted the lockdown, and they interpreted the quarantine, and they interpreted everything else that the government says. Yes. Like right now, as far as they're concerned, it's business as usual.
Yep.
And that means literally that.
Yep.
They are not going to observe this the distancing. I may be wrong. And this is one of those situations where I actually pray I am wrong. But I highly doubt it. Just watch and see. They're just going to do exactly what they want to do.
Yep. It's actually exactly what they want to do. I was speaking to somebody who's out of Nairobi, and they're telling me the way people are behaving, it was market day, and the way people are behaving on market day, it's like the president said, Corona imeisha. This whole thing of barakoa, you stop bothering us with wearing masks. So the mindset is like, we have opened up. Corona is over. We have passed the bad phase.
Think of the pre-colonial,
pre-corona, pre-COVID, BC.
Yes.
Before COVID.
Thank you very much.
Voila.
Man, I thought you took me back. What was the mindset of the Mwananchi? A complete lack of trust in the government and anything it says or does.
Yeah.
So, if you suddenly say, okay, we're not confining you and we are giving you the freedom to do, well, A, B, C, D, but within these guidelines, that last sentence is the government speaking to itself.
ABCD within guidelines. First sentence was, we are not confining you. That was it.
That one, they've got it and they've understood it. The rest, the government is talking to itself.
It's fine print.
The government is talking to itself, so they also understand that. And they will continue. Until there is a deliberate effort by the government to try and figure out how it is they can gain the trust of the Mwananchi, this cat and mouse game is going to continue.
It will.
Unfortunately.
It's interesting because that you now put it against again, through social media, individuals who've come out and talked about the fact that they have been infected. And they're literally begging Kenyans to take this thing seriously, because then when you could walk and breathe the day before and then you find yourself under a ventilator the next day, reality suddenly strikes. And so, there's that call for Kenyans to take it seriously. Others say that, that's one person, it won't affect me. That won't affect me attitude is actually still quite existent. Now, speaking about those who may have not been infected, looking around the world in terms of numbers, we know that the president of Brazil has been confirmed. His test has been confirmed positive. The other day we were looking at just symptoms. And so now he is in isolation and he is dealing with this. And if we look at the numbers in Brazil, 1,674,655 with 66,868 deaths so far. Again, about half the numbers that are being recognized in the United States, who are at 3,097,084, looking at an increase of about 30,000 cases just yesterday. And so, even when the head of infectious diseases for the United States, Dr. Fauci, kept talking about the fact that they were going to reach their peak sometime in April. This is one country that has actually not reached the peak. Still number one in the world, the highest number of cases per day, the highest number of deaths on the globe, has still not reached a peak after 4 months of, this. So they're actually asking themselves the question that everybody else is asking themselves: what is going on?
They can't reach a peak.
So many things. Exactly. So many things have happened in the last few weeks. There was the Labor Day weekend, there was spring break, and then now there was the 4th of July, and everybody is just milling about as if nothing happened. The protests also that have been taking place.
Yeah.
Everybody mixing about in this cesspool of anti-racism and COVID. So, I don't, with the behavior, it's for sure that or rather, it's not surprising that they've not reached the peak, because it's going to continue climbing. All right, so those are the numbers that they're looking at, and it looked like the president wanted it to be a back burner conversation, but unfortunately, that cannot happen.
Which president? The American president?
Trump, yes. All right, Mexico, 6,258 cases in the last 7 hours, and we see now that about 12% of those cases having been realized have ended in death. 895 deaths also in the last 7 hours. And again, this is a problem for them, because it's not people who are sick before they realize these numbers, but people from these positive tests who have died in the last 7 hours in Mexico. So still a big issue there. The South American countries and Central American countries continue to realize more cases here and there, from Bolivia to Honduras. Australia seems to have picked up now with 126 cases, whereby the last few days they were recognizing the most they had recognized in the last 2 weeks was 50 per day. As of today, 126. So that continues to increase. So we're seeing an increase here and there. It's expected now that, this will continue to happen. The president of Ghana's results are supposed to be out today.
So he's also in what? He's in
quarantine. He's presented with symptoms, and his test results are being awaited.
Okay.
As of today. Interestingly, because I spoke to somebody yesterday, we spoke to him here in this room at some point, and in Ghana was one of the countries where they opened schools and then shut them. They opened schools, and within days there were children who had come home ill and then went to be tested and found to be COVID positive. So there was now the nationwide call, okay, we had said we're going to open schools, but they had to retract that decision and shut schools again. So just one example of what could happen if that decision is taken. Yep.
In Tanzania, the president is thanking God because they're able to deal with COVID.
Prayer seems to be the key.
People are not wearing masks. In fact, he's asking, see, we're here, we're not wearing those things, and we're not keeping distance. Look, and we're fine. And he basically just seems to be going gung-ho and saying...
Are the numbers bearing him out?
Which numbers?
Oh, yeah. True. Another way to deal with this is don't test, don't reveal numbers, just deal with it.
Yeah. However,
and no one's counting what's happening in the hospitals.
But also, we are not hearing a lot of cases of people crossing over from TZ across our borders, because that's something that you'd expect. But there are very many instances where you hear people who are not along those border towns, from all the way from Lunga, that people who've crossed over from TZ have been placed in quarantine, and then they have been tested. They've been found to be positive, okay, and sometimes they deteriorate, but then they heal. So there are cases of COVID-19. The number of the serious cases who would now be looking to seek medical attention across borders is not rising, but there are also very many instances where we hear people from Kenya actually go to seek medical attention across the border.
In Tanzania.
The Tanzanian hospitals are better in some areas. So because these are just same communities, it will be now to talk to the communities along the border to understand what they are seeing, what they are noticing.
Yeah, so a strategy of not sharing information, it's still a valid strategy if the president doesn't want to, is in denial.
Yep.
What do you do?
And not spread panic,
right,
as he calls it.
Right.
There's an election coming up. As you see, all countries with an election coming up.
Same MO.
Same. Now, we want you to read the Standard newspaper this morning so that we go along with us as we look at the headlines of the papers. From your mobile device, dial star 550 star 2 hash. That's star 550 star 2 hash. If you've got at least 20 shillings airtime on your mobile phone, it'll just cost you 20 bob, and that'll come from your airtime, and you'll be able to download the Standard newspaper and read it on your mobile device. Now, you don't need to download any app. You don't need to worry about data bundles. You don't need to have any sign-up form. That's all you need to do. Just dial star 550 star 2 hash. It's going to send you a message telling you click on this link. When you click on the link, it gives you 3 options. Would you like to read just today's paper for 20 bob, or would you like to subscribe for full week editions of newspapers, or every day for a month? When you choose, if you just choose today, 20 bob gone, we'll be able to give you at least 1,000 shillings, no, 1,000 shillings worth of free Safaricom airtime if you answer a question that I'm going to be asking you shortly. So just do that, 550 star 550 star 2 hash. Shortly, I'll tell you how you can win 1,000 shillings worth of Safaricom airtime. Good morning, 16 minutes after 6.
24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
All right, let's look at what Wednesday has in store. Today's Wednesday, isn't it? All right, 13 degrees in Nairobi. Partly cloudy conditions through most of the day today. We'll see highs of 23. Take a look then into Nyeri, where it's cloudy conditions at 14 degrees. Showers expected early on with highs of 22. And in Nakuru, 13 degrees and partly cloudy. Thunderstorms expected for highs of 22 and lows of 12. Eldoret is mostly cloudy at 13 degrees. Thunderstorms also forecasted for later. Highs of 18 and lows of 12. In Kisumu, it's mostly cloudy at 21 degrees, giving way to rains coming in with highs of 26. Taking a look then into Kakamega, it's mostly cloudy at 16. We'll see thunderstorms later with highs of 22 and lows of 14. It's partly cloudy in Malindi at 25 degrees. Also forecasted for rain with highs of 28. And lows of 24. It's mostly cloudy in Mombasa. We'll see rains here as well with highs of 29 and lows of 24. All right, let's take a look outside of Kenya. In Kampala at 18 degrees, it's going to follow in fine form also with showers, highs of 24 and lows of 18. It'll be thunderstorms in Dar es Salaam later with highs of 28, currently at 22 degrees and partly cloudy. Taking a look then down south in Johannesburg, where at 7 degrees, clear skies, but it'll go into a cloudy afternoon with highs of 17 and lows of 6. Let's look at Lagos. It's 25 degrees, clear skies this morning. It'll change though early on with thunderstorms, highs of 27 and lows of 23. Looking then on into Europe, it's a rainy morning in London at 14 degrees. It's going to go on through the day with highs of 19. Paris is clear this morning at 16, partly cloudy conditions later with highs of 27 and lows of 15. And we'll wrap things up for Tuesday night in New York at 25 degrees, where it's mostly cloudy. When the sun does come up, we'll see highs of 29 and lows of 23.
20 minutes after 6. Now, if you have dialed star 550 star 2 hash and access to the standard newspaper, go all the way to page 14. This is the editorial page, and we've got the editorial cartoon.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning.
We want you to look
Spice
and
up
study the
yourself.
editorial cartoon and then tell us what's the story. What is Gado saying?
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
The story of the editorial cartoon. That's on page 14 of the Standard this morning. Once you do that, you can call 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600 for a chance to win 1,000 shillings of Safaricom airtime. Now, CT Muga is in the studio and he's ready with today's proverb.
Be a mountain or lean on one. Let me repeat it. Be a mountain or lean on one. So Somali saying.
Somalis have mountains.
They do.
Okay.
You know, for something to be a mountain, it doesn't have to be the size of Mount Kenya or Kilimanjaro to be a mountain. No.
Can be the size of Longonot
Yes.
or Mount Margaret. Some of those two small mountains.
Or Mount Suswa.
Or Mount Suswa. Yes.
And my mountain could be bigger than yours, or your mountain could be smaller than mine.
Okay.
We're taking ownership of our mountains.
Our mountain.
It's good. Let's own them.
Add some depth to this.
Conversation.
Okay. So be a mountain or lean on one.
Yes.
Okay. Let's take a look at the headlines. What do you want to start with and do?
All eyes on men of the cloth as houses of worship reopen. So it's going to take more than a prayer is what the headline on the Standard is. Each congregation will be required to form a COVID-19 response team. A response committee to oversee the health guidelines. Houses of worship are banking on more than just prayer, not to be labeled as agents of spreading corona after they settled on Tuesday next week to reopen for congregants. How they will behave is one of the matrices that will determine if the country survives this pandemic or drowns in it. A small lapse could lead to a South Korea kind of situation where one person, patient 31, became a super spreader to over 1,000 others during a religious gathering in March. So here, there's been the clamor. Finally, churches will reopen. There are certain guidelines, certain measures that must be followed. Only 100 people in a service in an hour. And then there was a joke that came out later that, all right, then you're going to see about 10 services in a day.
Yeah.
Because then from hour to hour, since they've said we can do 100 per hour, you can still, get your however many that
the
you
restriction
can
is not
during
the
day.
number of services you do.
Exactly.
As long as in whatever service, whatever congregation you have is a maximum of 100.
Right.
But what's the size of church that would host 100 anyway? How many was it hosting before?
Well, you had a lot of churches that would hold up to, 800, 1,000 per service, depending on the size of the sanctuary, right? So it would, for a lot of churches, then you would see a reduction, which is obvious. And then even during that service, then you maintain social distancing and all of these good things. So my question is that, I think everybody now knows what they need to do.
But how do you select the 100 or 40 or 20, depending on the size of church? Because you're looking at, we
apply.
This is what was happening in
apply.
Europe,
So
actually.
You just apply.
On the website, you apply to
SMS.
go to church. Yeah, that was it. And
Is
you would
that
be
what your
Everyone has
selected.
a phone.
That's very good. Is that what your church has told you?
You're
There's
making
theory.
very many assumptions.
This is why
there.
when
Very
when
many
Mandru will ask
assumptions.
you,
Yeah.
are you sure she has been going to church?
There you go.
Have you heard anybody
then,
who's saying that this is what? Have you heard any of these church leaders saying this is what we are rolling out? Because we're not talking about what is possible. We're
What is
talking about
happening.
churches reopening. There has been a committee that has been sitting on this. There's been a committee that has come up with protocols. Have those protocols indicated how the people who attend the service will be selected?
No, but of course we are operating on the basis that we are climbing a learning curve, and that because churches, and in fact, are we talking about churches or places of worship?
Places of worship.
Places of worship, yeah.
have gone online. For me, I'm very impressed. It's a big thing. You've seen some of these religious leaders struggling with, just the whole idea of doing YouTube services, but it's been happening. So we are able to climb the curve. It depends on the extent to which, the religious institutions are very interesting because they're decentralized quite a lot. So there's a lot of autonomy at the local level. So it really depends on the pastor or the religious leader and the extent to which they choose to comply. They can do it, but will they? Now that you don't.
It's interesting.
Which is why I'm raising the question, because without that, if you've already told people this is what we're going to do, you can only host X number of people per service, you can only do this and the other, you cannot allow people below 13 or above 58. If you've gone to that extent, then go to the next step,
Which is?
Suggest how you're going to have people coming to your church.
I wouldn't
Give some direction.
I wouldn't say the
Those
direction
countries
is
that have
necessary.
followed that is because a direction was given.
Was it given, or
Yes.
did the churches come up with it?
And they gave the direction. The leadership,
Isn't that direction
the
already?
leadership of the churches came up with the direction.
Okay.
In this particular case of ours, we're looking at
This
the
is
big
an
churches.
announcement that was made a day ago. So,
Yes, but this committee has been sitting for 2 weeks. That's the job that they had.
right.
They had one job: come up
Right.
with modalities of how you're going to reopen the religious institutions and
Well,
organizations.
Eric, I come from a school of thought that believes that human ingenuity needs to be given space to express itself. So those are sufficient guidelines. The question is compliance. Will religious leaders lead by positive example in complying and coming up with their own, various denominations now coming up with guidelines?
The
Yes.
Interfaith Council
So I
Chairman, Archbishop Anthony Muheria, said he was cautious, and when he gave the announcement yesterday, and he's imploring churches to follow the guidelines strictly. Please let us not rush without preparation, he said. We understand the great eagerness and the longing we have, but with some patience and preparations, we can safely reunite soon as possible in our places of worship. So from that gives the impression, at the very least, that they're going to go into this with their thinking caps on and make sure that they do what they need to do to adhere. Because he goes on to further on say that we're going to go on our knees and pray, but we don't want anything that is going to reverse this decision that has allowed churches to open. And they're very aware that if any church, any religious organization is doing something against these measures or guidelines, they'll be shut down. And they don't want that. Okay?
I have faith in the big churches.
You do.
Because
But
the
the
big
small
churches
ones, right?
can give the direction. Archbishop Anthony Muheria and the Catholic bishops can come together and they can communicate to the rest. But the smaller churches that have still been trying to meet,
The ones who haven't bought
Yes.
into the whole...
there's some churches that have
It's not
still
just
been
the
saying,
smaller.
let's go and meet.
Yeah,
the other ones that you wouldn't
it may
think.
be smaller, but I think also, don't forget that early on, some of the spread was caused by Catholic priests
Yep.
who disobeyed the orders.
Of course.
The issue is churches are very independent in the way they manage their congregations, so it will come down ultimately to the individual religious institutions. And given the character of Kenyans, we can anticipate there will be violations.
Somewhere.
Somewhere.
To some degree.
And I think we can also anticipate there will be compliance by the majority.
Yep.
Unfortunately, those few who don't comply may
Spoil for everybody
Spoil
else.
for everybody.
Let's go to the phone lines. Marvin is calling in from Kahawa West. Marvin, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very fine.
You want to try and win 1,000 shillings worth of Safaricom airtime?
Yes, I do.
Do you have your standard newspaper on your mobile device?
Yes, I do.
Go to page 14 and there's the editorial cartoon.
Yes.
Tell us the story of the editorial cartoon.
So the editorial cartoon has what seems to be the Embakasi MP talking to DJ Evolve. He seems to be in a hospital bed, and he's saying that if you don't apologize to me, I'll withdraw my support for your medical, then sue you.
Who's saying?
That looks like Babu Owino.
So the person who's saying this is telling DJ Evolve, who's there's a bed here that's labeled DJ Evolve. So the DJ Evolve is lying on the bed and is being told, if you don't
if you don't apologize to me, I withdraw my support for your medical, then sue you.
Wow. What do you make of that, Marvin?
DJ Evolve is in a pretty precarious situation right now.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. Marvin, thank you very much. You win this 1,000 shillings worth of Safaricom airtime.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations for that. Stay on the line, speak to our producer, and he'll take your details and have the 1,000 shillings coming your way.
Thank you.
This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. It's now 6:30, so what we need to do now is look at traffic and then come back to this conversation, taking a look at the newspaper headlines and what others stories have been covered in the papers this morning. Good morning. In the Situation Room this morning is Nduoko, Eric Latif, C.T. Muga, and Wanjiru Gekonyo.
All right, interesting, because we hear that, there's traffic at a lot of the terminals leaving the city of Nairobi, and you've been told if you're planning on going west that a lot of the offices will be packed full today, so you want to get your tickets early. See a lot of outbound traffic on Thika Road still today, inbound as well, as far back as Safari Park Hotel. That has started early, so, plan your journey early so that you don't get stuck. It's looking pretty good in most parts of the city right now. Not so bad on Mombasa Road. Of course, we've not gotten into traffic hour just yet. We'll probably see what that looks like in a short while. So for now, you'll be able to get around without too much of a headache. We'll be here to let you know how that changes. And if you see anything that we should know about, also don't hesitate to let us know. Spice FMKE on Twitter. We'll take a look at what the traffic situation looks like in about half hour or so. But for this Wednesday morning right now, it doesn't look too bad.
We are looking at the newspaper headlines. Remember, the live stream is up, www.spicefm.co.ke. You can watch the show on YouTube, Spice FM KE, on Twitter and Facebook, Spice FM KE. Wanjiru, what interesting story are you looking at?
I've got two. One is a comment really on the headline story about mass school repetitions and schools, primary and high schools not opening until next year. Of course, the universities should be able to open in September. And I was trying to, my reflection is are we okay with this? Because it's all right for schools not to open, but I'll just restate what, the proposition that I put forward yesterday is the government should have taken this opportunity to get schools onto online learning. Recognizing some areas are hard to reach, we must remember that the Jubilee Coalition had a laptop project for schools, and laptop is synonymous or would indicates their intention to get schools online. So, I find it unacceptable that the ministry has not looked for additional money. What does CDF do? There's some 30 billion, 30, it was reduced to 30, but some 40 billion that goes to CDF each year. What does this money do? It's national government money for infrastructure. So why could they not have made a plan? And the thing is, setting up digital connection and technology is also in line with the last mile electrification project.
Okay, so practically you're saying that between March and now, we should have seen schools having laptops across the country.
No. We should have seen a task force the school,
Because remember, students are at home.
they're at home.
They're not in school.
So efforts should have been made to look at how do we get students connected so that we can get schools back to learning. I mean, the ministry had talked about, of course, using national broadcasts.
Which have been ongoing.
Yeah, which have been ongoing. There, like counties have set up internet. Like, for instance, in Nakuru, you can get free internet. So efforts should have been made to think through how do we reach these students so that we don't lock them out of the education process. And the question would come down to what is learning. At some levels, what is learning and how can we work to ensure that students are learning?
Don't you think the effort that they made with KICD rolling out these radio and TV programs is an effort?
And why is that effort not being counted as part of the curriculum? Because if it is an effort, then why are you saying students aren't learning?
Because
you see, learning is not physical.
If you're talking about just primary school, there are 8 classes, all right? Each goes to school, spends 8 hours in school. You have one radio, one stream. How are you going to ensure that standard 1s are learning from the same radio and standard 2s and standard 3s
what about a
at the
school
same
that
time?
has streams? So you find this class, this number of streams, this one.
But at least it's the same. It's if you're saying that you're rolling out information for
that problem
standard
is actually
1s.
not what you've discussed as a problem is actually not a very big problem in this sense. What you need to have is a speaker in each of the classrooms. That's it. If you have one radio.
This is what I am saying, City. Get it? So this one radio, between 8 and 9, is it speaking to all standard 1, 2, 3, 4 individually? Or is it only speaking to one?
No.
This is what I mean. So right now, what KICD has is between this hour and this hour, we have a specific class that is learning. And therefore, they're going through revision. So that class will not get another opportunity to get to the radio until maybe tomorrow. So basically, you're saying
and
that
for another subject, even.
for another subject.
Yeah.
So you've only done one subject a day. So is that sufficient?
No, it isn't, but you cannot say it is nothing.
Exactly. It's something.
You see, what perhaps I would look at is how can this be developed so that it actually occupies the entire curriculum that students are supposed to be going through. Now, what I know of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, it isn't as though they don't have such a plan probably in place. They probably have it in place. The problem usually as it usually is the implementation. That institution has people who think ahead, plan ahead. They will advise the government, but as usual, I think then politics comes in. And why politics comes in is because all these things require money.
It's commercial interest.
Yes, but radio actually is not expensive. As far as expensive things go, radio is not expensive. And even having more than one radio in a school is not expensive. If when I was in school, which was in the previous century, a hell of a long time ago, there was radio.
I think there's a number of things that we have widespread. We've got radio, we've got phones, USSD, not talking about smartphones. There's also some level of internet access. So what we would have needed to see is, number one, what City has said, is where is the money? But over and above the money, what are the learning outcomes that need to be achieved at a minimum? And how do we achieve these learning outcomes? How do we adapt this curriculum so that when I sit and engage with this student, whether it's through radio or whatever means, that student is able to self-learn? So we wouldn't have expected KICD to bring the same curriculum and execute it through a different format. It would have been, let's reduce to learning outcomes. Children need to learn how to count. They need to learn how to write sentences or whatever it is. And this is how we can do it. So yes, I don't buy the thinking that students can only learn when they are physically assembled. Recognizing that of course, it's desirable to have them in school for very many reasons, school feeding and all of that. I think this is a cop-out. I think this is government not taking learning sufficiently seriously because they are able to find money to put up BBI project, Nairobi Expressway, So for me, I think we should challenge this and say if the judiciary has been able to go remote, and the judiciary has actually said even when things open up, they will continue transacting remotely because of the efficiencies around that.
Yep.
So the future is going to be more and more based on going remote. So this is an opportunity that maybe Makoha, sorry to say, is just out of step, lacking that vision, out of step with really the digital economy completely.
If you want to understand how serious
Yes.
this thing is,
Yeah.
our universities teach IT or ICT. They have not been able to provide e-learning for university students. We teach it. Students graduate and yes,
Theory.
and work and come to work in the ICT world.
Yes.
Now,
With theory.
a solution such as this one should have seen our universities working in tandem with the Kenyan Institute of Curriculum Development to come up with a Kenyan solution. It can't be one. You know why? These far-flung areas who do not have internet connectivity would still need to learn, but a plan that suits them ought to have been in place as you work towards giving them ICT connectivity.
With the balloons now flying above our airspace.
With all those wonderful balloons flying around the airspace, Eric, you've got it quite right.
I think the university is not rolling out e-learning is just complete and direct failure by the university administrations. That is, we can't even discuss that. That is gone. Now, the opportunity, and I think you've said it well, is working with these institutions and the government and KICD in seeing how can we roll out some of these services.
Finland did something which was unique. The government brought in corporate entities who have the means and the power to be able to spread this gospel of e-learning. We have such organizations in this country. You mentioned balloons. Perfect. Now, I don't know. How long can this stay in the air? A couple of months, is it? Before?
No, they're here.
No.
They're here to stay.
There's a limit to how long they stay in the air before they come crashing
not
down.
months.
The other point,
It's months, Eric.
just linking on what you're saying, how many households have tablets based on this laptop project? Because eventually they went for tablets,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there are households that already have tablets. You see, if you're equipping a standard one, the presumption is that child is in a home with other students. So you're not giving each and every student a laptop
They were not
or a
households.
tablet.
Those were in schools and they were being shared.
Yes.
It wasn't
Eventually.
it wasn't a child, a laptop per child.
But,
or a tablet
but
per
extend that thinking in terms of what would it take to make sure that every household that didn't have a tablet got a tablet.
But Njiro, you actually hit the proverbial nail on its proverbial head when you talked about the phone. Is there any part of this country where people don't have telephone connectivity?
No, telephone connectivity is everywhere, but everybody having a mobile phone, no.
You see, again,
Because now that's where now the other conversation has. You see,
Yes.
every time this conversation comes up, it's countered by that issue of equality and all.
No,
And everybody having access.
is
So
that factual?
it is factual.
It is factual.
If you look at
Not every home
telephone
has-
coverage, there are very few. There's this
no,
financial.
When you pause a bit.
There's an FSD program
Pause
that
a bit.
transfers money to very vulnerable households, and they do so based on a Mulikamwizi standard USSD financial transfer system.
feature phone.
And if you look at their statistics, actually the numbers that aren't on phone are very, very few. The ones that, there are still those who cannot be reached, but they are becoming fewer and fewer.
You see,
Yes,
we are talking about learning
yes.
and how this availability can be converted so that it becomes a tool for learning. It hasn't become that. That is why I was bringing in the discussion of corporates that deal in these things, because they make sure that they have sufficient coverage for their clients right across the country, because that's how they go around making their money. Now, that same thinking converted into learning. I say this because the government can't do it. No, not there. There are no half measures here. The government can't do it, won't do it.
But the policy comes from government.
The policy is
Isn't it?
already in place,
Yeah.
and it's been in place since this government first got in.
It's rolling it out. It's the issue of rolling
Yes.
it out. Taking a quick break at 6:45. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. We'd like to remind you about the Kenya Ports Authority and the new platform that is called Captain Cargo, which is an information platform. Gives you all the information that you need to know about the port operations, about import and export. If you're importing goods from other parts of the world and you'd like to, bring these goods into the country, how do you get them cleared through the port of Mombasa? So City Muga, for instance, what do you want to import? You have a container coming in from China. What's it carrying? From Guangzhou.
What is it carrying? You mean apart from stones? What? Okay.
You're importing some stones from China.
Mitumba.
No, China, Mitumba, no.
No.
Who are those clothes going to fit? Okay.
Below the belt this morning, but okay.
It's new clothes.
No, the Chinese size.
What I would bring, a whole container load of from China, are agricultural implements.
Bas.
Now,
Hey, you're
They
very
get to Mombasa.
development conscious.
So
Step
Ndu,
one.
you are our person.
Step one. Now you're bringing this in. The first thing that you need to know, you need to arrange for your cargo inspection. Okay, this is not up to you to do because you're the one who's bringing it in. You bear that responsibility, right? But then how do you go ahead and do that? You arrange for your inspection and you have to conform with the pre-shipment verification of conformity to standards. And this information, again, available on this portal. So at least you know that that's the first thing that you need to do. Secondly, now this partner, which again, there's a partner. So you don't have to go into this whole body looking for who that is. There's a partner then who will now give you your certificate once you have gone through the conformity. So if you're conformed, you get the certificate. If you don't conform, obviously they tell you there's certain things that you can't do, which might be a little too late.
Am I told
if you've
these
already
things in
bought-
advance, or should I
Yes.
find out these things in advance before I import?
Before you import, of
Okay,
course.
carry on.
So because in order for you to
This
have
is
imported,
actually happening in Guangzhou.
this is there. So before the importation process
pre-shipment.
begins, this you need to make sure that you have this certificate. So they're working in tandem and they're letting you know what happens on this side. So then after it's all done, you have your certificate, your cargo is loaded, and it's then put on the vessel and then it is shipped to Kenya.
Okay.
We'll come and find out now later what happened.
So those 3 steps, we have dealt with your stuff in Guangzhou.
It's on the way, it's on the high sea.
Pre-shipment inspection and all. It's on the ship. In the next hour, we'll tell you when it arrives. So, City,
What
you
should
Sawa
we do?
wait.
kabisa.
You
Okay.
wait. 11 minutes to 7 o'clock. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, and we continue looking at interesting headlines in the newspaper this morning, stories that, really stick out. So it's a slow start for transport sector. You know now that vehicles have been allowed to come into and out of Nairobi, Mombasa, and Mandera. So, but there are those requirements. The requirement is that the crew need to have some certification. So you're telling the crew to go get tested and come with a COVID-19 negative certificate before they operate the vehicle, transporting people out of the city. This is going to take a while. If we are only talking about 2,000 samples getting results in a day, how long is it going to take if we add now this Matatu crew and the buses, the long-distance buses? So they're already saying, okay, so this is going to be a challenge for us. And also looking at the number of reduced people per bus. So this story, for example, is quoting the chairman of Coast Bus Ajaz Misra, who says, we shall have to increase the fares to help us stay afloat as we operate under the new normal environment where buses are not allowed to carry to maximum capacity. So there's already that issue, that challenge as well. In Nyeri, operators are saying that the mandatory certification for drivers and touts may not be effective because the same directive is not applying to the passengers.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask if this directive applied to passengers as well, that can you travel then even without having a negative
you
or
go
positive
as you
test?
are.
Right.
Well, actually, it's really hazardous for the crew.
The crew,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
If they have to go through the trouble of making sure they're all right, imagine now they're dealing with now passengers who are coming in from whence they came is unbeknownst to them.
Indeed. I think that whole, this thing of saying test the matatu crew, even test the restaurant people.
Unless you're testing
Everybody
week.
who comes, every week.
Actually-
Every
Every
be
week.
tested
Yeah.
every week.
Actually,
But
what you do, that burden can be shifted to the association that manages the affairs of these businesses. And they're already organized, they already know what to do, and they can work in tandem with their ministries of health or the people who are concerned and say, okay, these are our members, and this is what we perhaps need to do. For PSVs and even licensing drivers, there's a laid out procedure by which people get these licenses and people get these so-called certifications. All they need to do is look at what it is that is needed in these times and with the COVID and work with these organizations. Because the moment you say individuals, go and do it.
But you see, even working with the organizations, you're still talking about the individuals. Because yes, you're operating a restaurant, you belong to the Kenya Association of Hotel Keepers and Caterers, all right? Then that has already organized with the Nairobi Metropolitan. Remember, we spoke to the Chief Officer for Health, and he told us where the clinics are, where they're conducting the tests, specifically for restaurant people. You still have to look at your staff, CT, in your restaurant, going to get this, to get tested, wait for the results, and those results, every 14 days, they have to go and get retested.
Okay. I think, are those the guidelines?
That is
right
what
now?
is
It's
happening.
That's what's going on.
So every 14 days,
Yeah.
the hotel and restaurant staff have to go get retested, and they have to come up with their negative certifications.
Right.
But they live here. They use a matatu to go home. They are living They are not in a bubble. If they were in a bubble, then you could say that we have tested them, they're negative. For the next 14 days,
they are in this bubble,
in a controlled environment, so we know.
But I think the aim of the testing is based on the assumption that if at 14 days you're in the clear, and then when you go back into work, you observe all the guidelines, you're minimizing the chances of transmitting the infection. Because you do need, testing is one of the ways to avoid the transmission. So if this was also applied in the transport sector, where they say every 14 days, and government then makes testing accessible, the other aspect is the compliance. Because yes, you've been tested, but then when you get back into the restaurant or into the public, the PSV, you need to comply, and customers also need to comply. Now passengers and customers are not being tested, so they must comply. They must sanitize, they must wear the masks, and they must distance. So it's about compliance. And I don't think it's saying it's 100% proof, but it's reducing the chance of transmission. Our weakness is compliance, because what will happen is people will then begin to bribe compliance officers. They didn't go for the test.
Another big weakness, Wanjiru, is our testing capacity. We are talking about 2,000 a day. Let's now say the buses that are plying Western and Coast alone, those are 2,000.
But what did we see at the border that was happening the other day when there was this whole hullabaloo about,
Did you see how long those queues were?
Did you see those queues? And then what happened? They said, I am on the Tanzania side, I am negative, I'm positive. If I want to get to the Kenyan side, 2,000 shillings will get me negative.
That's the
So you can imagine what is going to happen in this transport sector when people are looking now to be able to get that certification.
The problem is, has government ramped up testing, made it accessible and affordable? Because again, if you're pricing it high, you're going to
which is what the other thing that the Kenya
avoidance.
Medical Association was saying. We have this limited number of test kits, Are we wasting them by just going, testing like that? Or should we be focusing our attention? Saying there are people who are coming to hospitals with symptoms, and these hospitals don't have the test kits, don't have access to test kits.
So
and
actually,
they're having to send people to, now you need to go to Kenyatta, you need to go to KU to be tested so that you can be attended to.
I think that's a very good point. So actually what emerges is that we are not ready to open because we are not able to test.
Because unfortunately, this is the thing. The information that would have been gathered from testing is the fuel that we would need to then make certain decisions. And if that information then doesn't exist, then...
Is Kenya still importing tests, or have we got local tests?
No, is the answer to the second question.
It's not entirely true.
There has been some effort by Cambridge to do...
Not only that, the center, the Cambridge Center in Kilifi, in conjunction with Oxford University, have come up with a test that focuses on, all these tests focus on antibodies, but they do have a test, and they have come up with a test. So the answer to the question is, we do.
That's commercially
They've come up with a test, but is it being used now for testing purposes?
That I don't know.
An antibody test
don't
also
think so.
have a limitation. Apparently, there is a window in which you don't have the antibodies.
It's actually meant for
But
screening,
also
really.
Kenya, of course, we had heard from the Ministry of Health that Kenya was not going to use the antibody test because they did not.
We use the antibody
that
test, so
reliable.
this nonsense of
They said that they wouldn't. They would not
for this particular COVID.
For COVID, they were not going to use the antibody test.
We use it.
No, there was. I attended a COVID.
They are only using the
presentation.
They're only using the complete test
Where
in
is it
Kenya
not
right
being
now.
used?
Exactly.
They're only using the
in
complete
fact,
test
Kenya
right
is
now.
using a very
PCR.
robust. They're using two, a double test. They're doing the one in the deep throat and the nasal one.
We know the countries where they're using the
You know,
antibody.
PCR
Senegal is
tests.
one of those countries.
What you do, the deep throat and deep nose is not a test. It is
just
where
a
you get
collection of
the
the
collection of
sample.
the specimen, and then you take that to the lab and
you
use
test
it.
it.
Yes, there's a sensitive. It's called a PCR test. Okay, there's a point I'm trying to make here. All these tests that relate to mass testing, let me assure you, they are antibody tests predominantly. Because really, how do you even get an inkling that this person is unwell? But it is not your average or ordinary antibody test. It's an antibody test that is cured with an assay that focuses on COVID. Just if you have information that is contrary to what I'm saying, please consult the person you spoke to.
Yes, the person I spoke to, and I don't remember the terminology. I wish I had paid more attention, but I
Dr.
wasn't
Masi
thinking.
Korir is listening. Dr.
Yes,
Masi, just
can clarify
just
for
clarify whether we actually are doing antibody
Antibody
testing or PCR, or is PCR some form of antibody test?
No.
It's
PCR
not.
is a far more complicated.
Bas, okay.
It's
So
what they're calling the
are we
complete
doing
test.
that?
It's the complete test.
Coming to the
Kenya
top
is
of the
doing
hour,
complete.
CT, today is, it's called what? Proverb.
Yes, be a mountain or lean on one.
In this particular case, BPCR.
You know, what we're dealing with here is what the government says vis-a-vis what they actually do.
Okay.
So,
We'll see. Dr. Masi Korir will clarify that for us and tell
You
us.
shifted goalpost city, but let us move on.
Good morning, 7 o'clock.
Okay, it's not looking too crazy in Nairobi today. You're just taking a spot look into Kisumu and Mombasa as well. And traffic is not too terrible today. Getting off of Mombasa Road today was a dream already for people. 10-15 minutes at the Nyayo Stadium roundabouts. Hooked up to some traffic there on Uhuru Highway all the way into town and then into Westlands. It's going to take a while to get out of that. Traffic is still backed up on Thika Road all the way far back as Safari Park Hotel, inching along quite slowly. In and outbound on Thika Road today. We'll take a look at other parts of the city in a short while, but traffic doesn't look too bad this Wednesday morning. We'll see what it looks like later. You should bump into something. Do let us know. Spice FMKE on Twitter.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic.
Remember, we are live streaming the show as well on www.spicefm.co.ke, and also you can watch us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, SpiceFM.ke. So, C.T., you have really, thrown a curveball at us. We have to bring in an arbitrator.
Yes,
this
we
is
do.
Dr. Mercy Korir. Dr. Ari, good morning.
Morning, Eric.
How are you?
Morning, everyone. I'm very well, thank you.
Everyone is fine.
Good morning, Daktari.
Good morning. It's always good to hear you guys in the morning.
It's good to hear you in the morning as well.
Uh-huh.
So, straight into this. Settle this one once and for all. Is Kenya doing PCR tests, antibody tests, or both?
So we have the PCR testing for the mass testing that you see being announced every other day. But the antibody-based testing is on research. Remember the story we did about Kemri Wellcome and a few other partners here when they did samples of blood donated and they were checking if there were presence of antibodies to determine
they were
the
screening the
extent.
blood.
Yes, so that was antibody-based. So it's on, the antibody testing is on research capacity, not yet out for public mass testing.
Okay.
Because that would be easy. It would mean you just drop somewhere like an HIV test, 10, 15 minutes, if you have been exposed to the COVID or not.
Okay.
But as it is for mass testing, we're still doing PCR. So the PCR detects the presence of the virus. The antibody tells you that in the recent past, this person has had this virus, but they're not necessarily sick
Positive
at that time.
at present.
Yes.
Right,
So
Dr.
that's the
Korir,
difference.
in terms of reliability, how do the two compare for testing COVID?
So each one of them has its own purpose and function. So the PCR testing obviously is your most reliable when you want to know who is actively carrying the virus, because it tells you that so-and-so has the virus right now. So it's able to inform you on some of the decisions that you need to make. Who do you need to isolate? Who do you need to do contact tracing on? Now, the antibody testing, on the other hand, tells you that so many people have been exposed, so your possible level of immunity or herd immunity in the community is this much, or this is the true extent of the disease in the country. So if you compare the antibody testing that estimated millions of people as opposed to the people we have confirmed who are 8,000 and something, you see where the difference is. So your antibody testing helps to give you a bigger picture. So on a macro scale, you're able to make policy decisions as a government. But now the PCR gives you more or less at micro level, because you need to know where the active infection is so that you're able to do quick containment measures. So that said, the testing of PSVs, crew, the testing of restaurant operators, for me, it does not add much value. One, because when you do the PCR testing, as you said, it's like a certificate of good conduct. It only says, as at the time we took that sample, the throat or the nasal swab that we are talking about, this person did not have the virus. And you see, by what we are doing, we take a sample today, you get your results 48 hours later. It doesn't, because you tested negative, does not mean that within those 48 hours you did not contract the virus. So for me, it is pointless to subject PSVs, restaurants, all of these public places to test, yet the people they are going to serve, the people they are going to attend to, are not being tested because they'll still be exposed. So I think where we need to drive our focus is two areas. One, for the general public to look at containment measures. People who are traveling and going to the villages, the matatu operators, just to inform if you develop flu-like symptoms, stay home. If you reach your destination, isolate. These are your points of call if you need help and things like that. 2 is to move this testing to all our healthcare facilities, because you need to be able to make decisions on people who come to a facility. For example, if somebody comes with a cough and fever and they are coming for antenatal clinic, for example, that's somebody you need to screen and find out.
Yeah.
If somebody comes with a cough, they're hypertensive, that is somebody you need to know, because they are at higher risk of suffering severe disease, so that as healthcare workers you are able to know how to handle them and how to manage them. So the test in this case gives you an opportunity to make a decision
on how
that
to
is actually useful to somebody, and then now you can do contact tracing. The other aspect of doing the PCR is maybe because every health center, dispensary, hospital in the country serves a certain catchment area. It's probably decentralized that testing to be pegged on these facilities, so that these facilities and their rapid response teams, their public health officers, community health workers can identify households within the community in which to test, so that you're able to do community testing. And then you can go the way that China has done, and I think it's Beijing, where if somebody in your estate has tested positive, you lock down that particular area or that particular estate. Let's say if you're in urban areas like Nairobi, if you're in Mashinani, you lock down a village so that you do containment. So if these are pegged to our facilities, then we are able to decentralize, because as it is now, national government will just be announcing to us figures every day
that come from the counties
that are not really useful in terms of decision making and in terms of helping Kenyans now that really more or less life is back to normal,
right?
Except school, which is still a problem.
Mercy.
And when you decentralize like that, you're able to even rope in schools and be able to have containment measures should you get an outbreak.
Thank you, Mercy. Asante sana for that clarification. Have a good day.
You too, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks,
All right.
Daktari.
All right, thank you.
Settled?
Yeah, we now need to nominate Mercy to become an official advisor of government, because what she's saying makes so much sense.
I don't think that's going to be far off. The way things are going.
Yeah, she's
Indeed.
making so much sense. So simple.
From around half past, we'll be speaking with the former head of the Debt Management Office at the National Treasury. But before then, there was something that happened in town yesterday. What was it? It was Sabasaba.
It was
Number
Sabasaba.
one.
Yes.
And Sabasaba was being celebrated in a Sabasaba way.
You know, okay, because we have not yet made Sabasaba a national holiday as we should. Because based on the conversations we had yesterday with Jeruga Dango, the significance of that date is one that needs to be marked on our national calendar, so that it becomes a day around which there is an agreement of what it means to us as Kenyans. So Sabasaba, civil society traditionally marks Sabasaba, and there were a number of activities. I know at least of 3. And interestingly, the media hasn't covered all of them. And there's one in the Standard on page 11, but I haven't found the story about the tear gassing.
Okay, so I'll help you with that. There was an uproar over clampdown. Some 56 rights activists taking part in a march yesterday. This was one of the other, activities that we saw to protest against police brutality. I mean, they used this Sabasaba celebration or this day to protest against the police brutality that's been happening in the country, even before COVID. And it was interesting because they were then arrested for flouting COVID-19 rules. And there was the spraying of tear gas within the city because of these marches.
The spraying
because
of the tear gas was within the COVID rules.
That's another question if you want to ask them.
And the arrest,
Right,
the roundup and arrest.
Also
Yeah, so
within
rounding them up
also
and putting
within
them
the
in one
COVID rules.
vehicle, and then taking them where they needed to go. So the coming together to protest police brutality then the police then came forward and, sprayed the tear gas, arrested, quite a number of them for flouting these rules. So it's just interesting. I think the irony is not lost that the same thing for which they were using the day to protest against, they were then arrested for by the same individuals.
There were a couple.
Was that brutality or was that enforcement?
No, there were a couple of protests. There was the Limuru Conference. The Limuru Conference was spearheaded by, there's a picture actually on in the Standard page 11, and it's a picture of John Githongo, David D. So it had these kind of civil society luminaries, as you'd call them, really reinforcing, and their target was the BBI. And that the BBI is seeking to undermine the constitution, seeking to re-centralize power, by weakening the judiciary and all of that. That was one. There was then the social justice centers have become a movement in this country, and they had protests, and the arrests were around their protests, and they were protesting in Dandora, in Mathare, in the outskirts. Now, what was interesting with the city is the bunch of people who are protesting in the city are not traditional civil society. And I know this because my daughter happened to be one of them. And this is a number of young people who are very unhappy about what the police have been doing in terms of brutality. And young people in this country, especially in urban areas, bear the brunt of police harassment, whether it's when they're out at night and whatever. And if you have young people under the age of 25, 15 to 25, they will have stories about the police. Now, they have been alarmed about the killings that have happened around the enforcement of curfew. And my daughter, who's not an activist, she's an artist, has been tracking conversations online. So the people who organize these protests are not a group I know. I think what we're beginning to see is that there are socially conscious Kenyans who are saying, we cannot continue like this and we need to step out. And the issues they identified were right of assembly, protesting against police brutality, right to food for those who are affected by the economic crunch, and right to access to water. So there were at least those three formations. There could have been others, and coming from different directions, which goes to reinforce what Jerugadhangu was telling us, that you will begin to see movements taking place. And these are movements of people who are saying, I can't do nothing. And from what my daughter said is there were about 100 people playing cat and mouse with the police. There was no brutality, but there was tear gas lobbed. But this is the only group that was tear gassed, the one in the CBD. The others, the others, not. I think they were tear gassed, and the arrests happened outside of the city. So those groups, now the social justice centers are organized. I think there's maybe around 15 or 17 social justice centers around the country, and they stand for constitutionalism. And so they are organized and they are on the radar. And in fact, the arrests, the detentions that have been taking place, are they called detentions when you disappear for 3-4 days and then you're found having been interrogated? These are tactics that the Moi regime used that are coming back. We didn't have these tactics.
They're not coming back, Wanjiro. They never went away.
Well, I don't think we had that under the Kibaki regime. They have come back. There was Edwin Kiama, the blogger.
My friend, in my neck of the woods where I come from,
right.
People
they disappeared you.
You go to a police station to visit for a while.
Yes,
no,
and
then you come back
2003 to
for opening up of a conversation.
2003 to 2012, we in civil society.
You can say there was a reduction, but you can't really say that there was
elimination. No.
Remember, this is the time when the government was fighting Mungiki. Do not forget that this is that season.
At that level.
So, yes. So, and very many stories that Maina Kiai will tell you that they recorded at the Human Rights Commission.
I stand corrected.
Of this.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the mainstream governance people.
16 minutes after 7, this is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Let's take a quick break, take a look at the weather, and the conversation continues. We now shift the conversation to debt management in the country. Good morning.
24 and 2 in Nairobi for most parts of the day. We'll see highs of 23 today. Looking into Nyeri at 14 degrees, it's mostly cloudy. The showers will come down soon. Highs of 22 and lows of 13. It's 14 degrees and partly cloudy in Nakuru. We'll see highs of 22 with rains in the afternoon. In Eldoret, it will be a wet afternoon as well. Highs of 18 and lows of 12. Kisumu at 21 degrees, partly cloudy this morning. Showers expected later. Highs of 26 and lows of 18. Rains are forecasted for the afternoon in Kakamega. It's mostly cloudy now at 16 degrees. In Malindi, 25 degrees and mostly cloudy. It's a chance of rain quite high, quite soon. Highs of 28 and lows of 24. Mostly cloudy in Mombasa. However, we will see rains later. Highs of 29. In Kampala, it's likely to be a wet afternoon with highs of 24. Currently at 18 degrees. Mostly cloudy conditions. Light rain showers already being experienced in Dar es Salaam at 24 degrees and going to escalate to thunderstorms later on with highs of 28 and lows of 23. We'll take a look at Joburg, where it's clear skies at 7 degrees. We'll see highs of 17 and lows of 6. And finally, for now in Lagos, the thunderstorms have begun. 27 degrees the high is where we will see today, and lows of 23, and chances of rain going well into Thursday.
Okay, so we've been having conversations ongoing conversations about debts, the transparency of our debts. We spoke to Transparency International, Kenya's executive director, and asked about the transparency of the government when it comes to the debts surrounding SGR, and we know that we don't have that kind of clarity. Who manages debt in this country? There's an office that's actually established even by statute and by policy on debt management at the National Treasury. We have spoken to various people who are experts on debt and economics who've talked about the importance of this particular office being completely autonomous from the operations of the National Treasury. But right now, in so far, it has been mixed up with here and there with the operations of Treasury. Anyway, does that hamper issues of transparency when it comes to debt? And now that the whole conversation is gearing and gaining momentum about Kenya seeking some sort of debt relief, even if not relief, but in some way in which we don't have to pay the close to $1 trillion shillings that is due for debt this year. So what is it that we need to do?
Right. And you're right, it is close to $1 trillion
Yep.
shillings. It's 900 billion
Yep.
that we need to pay. The issue of the autonomy of the debt management office is a subject of concern. And I'll just give maybe a little bit of context. When the public finance bill was being negotiated, because it was a negotiation, there was a policy that was prepared by the Task Force on Devolved Government. And the Task Force on Devolved Government had studied financial systems under various other devolved jurisdictions, and then given recommendations on what should be taken up in policy. With respect to debt, their recommendations were that there should be an intergovernmental budget authority that would manage debt. Intergovernmental, because of the discussion we were having yesterday, debt affects national and county government. And in places where you have devolved government, good practice is that debt decisions, whereas national government has the right and the mandate to procure debt, they have to do so in an accountable way that doesn't undermine the ability of other levels of government to conduct their services. That was one. The second is this policy had then proposed the system, and they had some accountability kind of criteria in terms of how standards to be met to qualify for debt. And this, at that point, of course, they were thinking about counties being able to borrow, because counties also are allowed to borrow, but they need national government guarantees. The third thing they recommended around this fiscal kind of body was that it would have representation by the national government, of course. Of course, the Treasury would be very key here, but you would then also have county government level and accountability to the wider stakeholders. Now, during the negotiations around the Public Finance Management Bill, at that point, the the director was Thuge, who then became the PS.
Yes.
And that team was very, very adamant that this provision would not see the light of day. And there was quite a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of stakeholder involvement because the CIC was the one leading the consultative process. You know, people like the World Bank, IMF were there, civil society were there, government
Why
was
were they
there.
so insistent?
They were very insistent around, there were very many things that needed to be negotiated. Public participation throughout the budget process, powers of the Treasury. There were two bills initially on national public finance, county public, they were then merged. So there were a whole load of things, and debt was one of these things. And what happened in the process of these negotiations, there was a capitulation on debt, because you can only negotiate for so long. There were deadlines by when this bill needed to be passed.
Yep.
And the capitulation was that the Debt Management Office became a department of the Treasury. Coupled with that, the Treasury has quite a lot of powers that then even holding the Treasury to account by Parliament is a bit of a challenge. What has then emerged around the Treasury powers and this department of DMO is that the Treasury has a lot of powers, but if the leadership is subject to presidential directive, the Treasury then works at the behest of the executive. And so if they are working at the behest of the presidency, and the Debt Management Office is a mere department where the director must, take direction. The director may give advice and say, look, I don't think we should go for the Eurobond because we can't afford to pay it. Or we can't go for the Exim loan to do SGR because we can't pay it and we'll be then forced to borrow because that's what government did.
We'll start paying it too soon after we've borrowed, even before we start realizing
too expensive.
The full benefits
Essentially,
of
it was a commercial loan.
Could it do more if it was more than just, if the Debt Management Office was more than just a mere department, if it was elevated in its responsibility?
So to become like the Auditor General's office or the Controller of Budget.
If it had more in terms of appearance and function, then would we see that it would have more then in terms of influence, in terms of what was done then or carried out by the executive?
Yes, I don't think independence, in my view, and of course we'll speak to the former director of the former director
DG,
of the
Debt Management Office.
Debt Management Office, the DMO. I think it needs autonomy. To my mind, it also needs social accountability. As civil society, one of the things we have proposed to the Treasury is we need this body to also consult stakeholders like ourselves so that it has a public participation mechanism. So government can say, we are going for a commercial loan and this is why we are doing it. And we are going to put it here, 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 and we will repay. That whole conversation should be subject to public participation and accountability. So yes, it needs autonomy. It also needs social accountability. And then the people who go in there have to be able to stand up to pressure. Because, for instance, we have constitutional offices right now. And those constitutional offices have sometimes, in some cases, not enforced their constitutional mandates. Because at the end of the day, institutions are manned by individuals.
Yeah.
So if Parliament has a nomination process that allows people who are aligned heavily, again, to the presidency or to the administration of the day, institutions and law don't implement themselves. They require on the courage and the integrity.
So it's about leadership. We can give it all the autonomy it requires, but if it has weak leadership, if it has leadership that still feels that they need to respond to the political power master somewhere, it'll still not make any sense. But basically,
It will
the
be
idea,
better. It will be better than the present situation.
the idea, though, is to have the Public Debt Management Office have some level of autonomy, like what I was saying, like the Auditor General's office or like the Controller of Budget, where they sit and they can look and make a recommendation without influence, right?
Yes, I don't think there was a need to
how
go.
would that happen?
I don't think there was a need to go for a constitutional body.
Not necessarily
but-
constitutional,
yes,
but in terms
but
of independence and
yeah,
being
independent body.
far removed from direct control of, there's just a
Of the
department
Treasury.
downstairs. Yeah, can
Of
you
the
call
Treasury.
the DG of DMO to come to my office right now to discuss this thing? So this is what we are going to do. This is a person from China. We are going to sign a loan next week. You go and discuss the details.
Right. So that they would be the ones to they give the advice, and maybe they'll need to have some approval, whereby if they feel what the executive wants is not in line with the debt standards, they should be able to say no. So that when Parliament gets its report, they're getting the Treasury's recommendation
And
the DMO
separate DMO
recommendation.
So essentially what we would get is that we would see results after several stakeholders then having worked in tandem, as opposed to an approach that seemed to have come from one office or one decision, as it were. So in terms of now accountability, transparency, you're seeing it across board when it comes to decisions that are being made.
Exactly.
Which I do believe, not just in debt, but across board is the kind of approach that should be held on a number of these things.
Yes, and you see it's a lacuna because there's been a lot of focus on public finance, on the formal budget system. And that one has quite robust mechanisms. And actually where there are violations, like Abraham Rugo told us yesterday, the violations are Parliament saying, anyway, this is not tenable, we don't support these proposals, but we'll still go ahead and approve them. That is now the failure of leadership. But the law is clear, and that's why their reports always conform with the law, but their ultimate decision is political.
Yeah.
Right? But yes, we need to, in fact, it would be very interesting to hear from the point of view of the former DMO what kind of pressures there were and what concrete recommendations. I think the last thing maybe to consider is that this process of discussing the debt policy started last year. Tani actually did stakeholder meetings last year, and this policy was supposed to have been published around September, October last year. If you go to the Treasury website, they say it's been enacted, but it hasn't seen light of day. It's not published.
Yeah.
So there is resistance. Why? Who wants to borrow? Who wants to add to our 900 trillion?
Who doesn't?
900 billion. We haven't reached 900 trillion yet.
Oh, sorry.
7:30, it's a situation on Kenya's biggest conversation. We are going to take a look at traffic, and then when we come back, we will speak to the former Director General of the Public Debt Management Office. He is Wohoro Ndoho. He is an economist, a public finance expert, and also a media commentator on impacts of economic policy. So this is a man who basically has been there, has been in the kitchen. He's now out. He can tell us what was happening in that kitchen and what is needed. And you see, he comments on impact of economic policy. So very, very good person to have. Wohoro Ndoro is on the line, but we'll be speaking to him shortly after we take a look at traffic. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
It's looking really good this morning. We don't see anything out of the ordinary except for the normal trouble spots on Mombasa Road. Just a little bit in the normal area around Cabanas and then coming down towards General Motors. That's where we see a bit of traffic. After that, though, it's given the all clear. A little bit on Uhuru Highway. We're likely to see that it'll clog up a little bit. Jogo Road is looking good. Langata Road and Gong Road coming out of Westlands into the CBD is looking great. Thika Road, however, inbound, coming from now Allsops, Survey. The service lanes, however, can be used. The main highway, though, is clogged up. We'll see how that opens up in a short while. It won't be too terrible, however. Spice FM KE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let us know what you see. You want to keep it moving. It's a cold morning. Fog is low in some areas, so you want to be careful. But you'll get where you're going in good time today.
26 minutes to 8 o'clock. The Situation Room is Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room this morning, Eric Latif is my name. We have Nduoko, we have Seti Muga, and we have Wanjiru Gikonyo. She's our guest host for this week. We are now discussing public debt management and, the moving towards debt relief transparency in Kenya. Let's speak to the former Director General of the Public Debt Management Office at the National Treasury. His name is Wohoro Ndoho. He is an economist, a public finance expert, also a commentator on impacts of economic policy. Wohoro, thank you very much for speaking to us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Situation Room.
Asante.
Now, in this COVID era, we'd like next time that you come and sit next to us here so we can have this conversation face to face.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. You've heard the kind of introduction that we had to this topic.
Yes, interesting.
What do you mean interesting? When someone tells you interesting, it implies very many. It could also imply that you guys got it so wrong that
it was very interesting.
That it was very interesting.
Very interesting.
Your perspective really
was interestingly wrong.
Yes.
No, I think I like the idea of debate. I think there's a couple of things we underrate as Kenyans. Is just how much public policy is debated in the public square.
Yep.
That is, it is not something to take for granted, and I think the high level of this debate, I think, is a welcome addition to our public conversations.
So you were the Director General of this Debt Management Office. Among the things that we were saying is this is a department of the National Treasury, which therefore does not have a lot of leeway in exercising autonomy. Many of the decisions that are made by the DG of the Public Debt Management Office will have to be checked, edited, and approved by somebody senior, which means that even if you had some contrary opinion to what the National Treasury wanted to do in terms of debt policy, then you are overruled. Is that the case?
Well, I think I'll address it in a more broader context, that any person who works in the executive, of course, is subject to directions of the executive.
Yeah.
Maybe the question is more, is there a framework within the law for that? And actually, the PFM Act does give the Public Debt Management Office some autonomy, semi-autonomy. The question is just giving effect. I think earlier this year, the minister began that process of granting that semi-autonomy to the PDMO. Now, beyond that, you could say that of any public office. And maybe something just to clarify something. Debt is an effect; it's not a cause. Debt is the effect of expenditure exceeding revenue. And so even this conversation around managing debt really belongs there first, because at the end of the day, if you have a budget deficit, if you are running unbalanced budgets or budget deficit, then you are going to end up with a debt situation.
So it starts from that point of the budget policy.
Yes.
Looking at, for example, this particular financial year, we are beginning the financial year with a budget deficit of upwards of 800 billion shillings.
Right.
So therefore, we're basically talking about we are going to borrow 800 billion shillings in the minimum to meet our spending needs.
Correct. And I think that even in that, you will get a situation where by borrowing, because your expenditures are consistently always higher than your revenues, really the conversation we should be having are what we call a fiscal consolidation. Can the government cut back on expenditure? The problem, of course, is in light of COVID right now, the government cutting back in expenditure is exactly the opposite of what we would expect the government to do, because we need to stimulate the economy.
Right. Mr. Wahoro, as we stand here and we look at this heavy debt burden, some of this debt was procured at a very high cost to the country, unsustainably and imprudently, actually. There have been criticisms about the type of debt Kenya went for, the conditions for borrowing, especially the commercial borrowing, the projects that were going to receive this money. There was no evidence that they could pay back that money in the time frame which this money was borrowed. There were transparency issues around, for instance, the Eurobond, where part of the money borrowed didn't even get into the consolidated fund, which is unconstitutional. So there has been imprudent decisions made around it. I mean, the executive can run a deficit, and then what then is the role of the DMO to advise the executive on how to fund the deficit, and how does the DMO then ensure that the decisions made around debt do not undermine the sustainability, the fiscal position? Because right now Kenya actually is at risk of defaults, and you've seen the international creditors flagging this. As civil society, we had actually flagged the sustainability of Kenya's debt as risky, and the reason we did that is we said the investments themselves were not sound. So we are seeing, to what extent or what has been the reason behind the type of debt decisions that have been made? And do you think those, maybe you disagree, were those decisions sound, or those decisions driven by faulty information and also some corrupt decisions? Of course, there's been some indictments around this. Yeah. Yes.
Well, Let me just start by saying, first and foremost, is that the debt department itself has very good people in terms of expertise, knowledge, and there's a whole protocol around how these loans are analyzed and recommendations are put forward. Now, those recommendations are just their recommendations. They have they're not legally binding to the superiors, for the simple reason that the executive cannot have many centers of power. Now, as far as the question then of whether it was sustainable, whether that particular decision could have been made better, there's a whole mechanism around the constitutional framework in which we work in. And to some extent, I think to a large extent, this is also a question that goes beyond the technical expertise of the PDMO. There are other institutions that are also part of that decision chain. And one of them, of course, a clear one is the parliament itself. And even within Parliament, there's one little office which we don't hear much about, but I think we should pay a lot of attention to it, and that is the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Yeah.
That by law is mandated to give expertise, arm's length expertise and knowledge or advice to the Parliament in making decisions regarding any document coming to it from the Treasury. And I'll draw your attention to a couple of the reports. In fact, the last one was for the BPS, in which section, I think from clause 73, they then analyze the PDMO's recommendations and proposals to Parliament. So to your question, Wanjiru, about whether something was sustainable or not, yes, the technical expertise is there, and it is given as a matter of course, as a matter of professional course. The question then becomes that beyond that point, when you're just a technical expert, who then has the legislative and constitutional mandate to then make a decision on whether it is a good decision or not? That does not reside necessarily in the PDMO. The PDMO is there to be the technical expertise that gives the advice. Once it gets into Parliament, then there's a second conversation around there.
So when you see the country going more and more into commercial debt, is that advice that's coming from the experts at the PDMO?
Well, one of the things that changed in the last 3 years was, one is we rebased. The Kenya rebased its economy, and we then were promoted, so to speak, into a lower middle income country.
Promoted, yeah.
With that promotion, with that elevation, new sources of funding became accessible to us. Now, as to the wisdom of whether we took them for the right reason, that again, referring back to Wanjiru's question, was something that was put in a context of advice to the executive. The decision thereafter then belongs elsewhere.
So what in this particular case would the PDMO have advised?
There would have been a range of them. There's a data sustainability analysis that's always done for any loan that's going to be taken. There's a conversation, of course, that is had with the budget team as far as the budget performance is concerned. And because by and large debt would happen to come into the room when expenditures begin to exceed the revenue, early in the conversation around budget, the PDMO would of course have been consulted. Now the options between taking concessional loans, which is the World Bank and the multilateral organizations, versus commercial, it was a function of the fact that suddenly we were in a place where we had more options than just the traditional one. Now, as the motivations why one would pick a commercial loan versus a concessional loan, again, once the recommendations are made, then the decision then belongs to others up the food chain.
Right, Mr. Ohoro. From what you're telling us, it sounds then that maybe I'll put it in a more positive way. As the PDMO is presently structured, does it meet best practice? Because we are still awaiting the policy. These conversations, I don't know whether it's in abeyance or what has happened. Different recommendations were made. In your view, what's the best practice? What have been the gaps in this process? Is it enough for the PDMO to give technical advice? And what are the gaps in the debt procurement process that have driven us to a 1 trillion debt?
Well, on several levels. One, it is true that the PDMO, like I keep emphasizing, the PDMO does not have a problem with expertise. So the issue is not expertise or best practice, even internationally. The question then becomes that in the decision-making process, beyond the technical advice, who else needs to be in that room? And that's the national debate we are having. If you were to ask me, could PDMO do better? Of course, we could always do better. But as far as the technical side of it, I cannot fault the PDMO. And of course, I have a bias to the extent that I've actually worked with the team.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that once you're told, okay, we have a gap of, let's say, 200 billion. Do we borrow domestically or do we borrow externally? That becomes a conversation that will also include our fiscal agent in the Central Bank of Kenya. It will also include the budget team saying, okay, given this is a gap, is there anything in our expenditure that can be rationalized? Then suddenly the conversation of debt management belongs in the right space where it brings all these other actors into the room.
But ultimately, the politician will make the decision.
Ultimately, not just politician, but it's a fact that even before the politician makes that decision, he is given as far as the machinery of due diligence in the system, there is sufficient space there for it to happen. Maybe the question we should also be asking is, to what extent we as a public are we aware and how well read are we as far as the documents regarding debt are concerned? So, for example, right now we've got the public debt management strategy that was approved as part of the budget process. I would actually say take a very close look at that. Look at even the Parliamentary Budget Office's response to it. Then I think you'll find that some of these conversations actually belong in some very interesting places in terms of enforcing some of the questions I think Wanjiru is alluding to.
Let's take a quick break. We are speaking with Wohoro Ndoho. He's the former Director General of the Public Debt Management Office at the National Treasury. We are talking about public debt management. As we go into this quick commercial break, let's also remind you about the new portal by the Kenya Ports Authority. This is Captain Cargo. kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo. Cargo is Kargo. We have been helping CT Muga to import container from Guangzhou, China. The last we spoke in the last hour, we had gone through 3 steps, CT, where your cargo was loaded onto a vessel.
Yes, a supersonic vessel that was going to arrive here in 2 hours.
In 2 hours.
Right.
Now, before it arrives, let's start preparing you on what happens when it arrives into the port.
Okay, so what? It's on its way to Kenya, right? Well, hopefully we can get all the paperwork done in those 2 hours. But all right. So you need to have an IDF, which is an import declaration form. It's available at the Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, and the KPA and KRA work in tandem, so they know that you would get that documentation with all the other documentation that you had presented earlier, right? And now this declaration form then is sent to KPA on your behalf. You don't actually need to do anything with that. It's then sent back.
Who sends it?
KRA sends it to KPA on your behalf once you've done everything that you need to do, right? You've presented all the information. So now that's step 5.
How long does that take?
The shipping agent sending this thing to...
It's an email.
To KPA.
It's an email.
It's an email.
It's a form, yeah. It goes, right?
Fine.
So,
Email.
Okay, so we're talking about something that will be done in minutes. And they've cleaned up the system to make sure that it's seamless and efficient and quick. Then the shipping agent sends the cargo manifest. So now you have a shipping agent who is at the port, right? They send...
I don't have to bother. There's one who's available.
Yes.
Okay.
You don't have to
So
bother.
I don't need a clearing agent.
You just need to know what your shipping agent is doing.
Remember this pre-shipment of verification that you did at the very beginning? It involves all of these things now they're asking about. I don't need to present myself because all of that would have been listed, who the agent is and what their duties are. Okay? So now we're at step 6, where that agent, who had already been predetermined at step 1, sends the cargo manifest to KRA. So they have everything. They're waiting for this supersonic vessel to land. They have the papers. So all they're going to do is tick the boxes. We'll go to the next steps later.
As we proceed.
Okay.
Helping City Muga to ship and get his cargo from Gwanju to Nairobi. City, you just need to sit in Nairobi, but we just want you to know, what is this that you need to know? Who is working for you? What do they require? What documentation do they need to do? And all this is basically provided by the KPA. Now, this information is clear. You don't need to be told by the shipping agent. Unajua mzee, tulisahau kufanya ile import declaration. No. You know in advance. As you're talking to your engaging a shipping agent, you also know what you need to do. kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo, KARGO. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Take a quick break and then we continue our conversation with Wohoro Ndoho, who is the Executive Director of the former Executive Director General of the Public Debt Management Office at the National Treasury. Good morning. To 8, we're speaking with Wohoro Ndoho. He's the former Director General of the Public Debt Management Office. So, City, you have a question for Wohoro.
Yes, there was a 2012 Public Finance Management Act which sought to actually ensure that this office of the Director General has the powers of the Treasury Cabinet Secretary. Were these powers? Yes.
Powers of the CS?
No. The specific person who deals with such matters within Treasury. Yes. There was a secretary whose job was just to manage those things.
Okay.
All right. Now, some of these powers were supposed to be transferred to the DG, which would have given him a little more autonomy. What I'm actually asking is, was this ever the case?
I think what you're referring to is the PFM Act gives the Public Debt Management Office
Yes.
a semi-autonomous status within the Treasury. It is only department in Treasury that's also mentioned in the Constitution, giving it a fairly special place in the hierarchy of institutions. There's also a second office that was supposed to be within the Department of Debt, which was the holder of government securities, yes? I can't remember that's the name. So that when government raises any bonds, basically those will be registered by the PDMO as part of its autonomous function. Now, the practice of it, I think to some extent, it was all part of the implementation, the rollout of the implementation of the various constitutional functions. And I think to a large extent that was not fully implemented. In fact, it was one of the big impetuses for why this year that whole issue was revisited with a view of actually granting the PDMO that independence.
But there was specifically the borrowing powers that the Cabinet Secretary had. Was that ever transferred?
No. That and I think is I need to double check that. The borrowing powers cannot be independent of the CS of Finance. It must only be in consultation because, as I said, a debt is an effect. It is not a cause in its own right. So that the conversation should always start with budgeting, with balancing the budget, and that if that can happen, then debt comes into the room. And there's been some interesting developments even since my time and even after. And that's been the fact that the PDM must sit in a conversation about budget a lot more, rather than getting invited after the fact once the budget has been established. And that, even for my time, was a very useful and rich conversation to have, so that the budget making process itself, by having the PDM in the room, also meant that some of the harder questions around expenditure control could be raised and addressed.
Right. Mr. Wahoro, from a transparency point of view, there are concerns in regard to two areas. In Kenya, we appear unable to track the expenditure of debt. So, the procurement maybe now has more transparency in terms of this amount of money and this is where it's going. But then once it enters into, it becomes expenditure, we are not then able to say where, the Eurobond money went exactly. So number one, that's a transparency concern when we are looking at value for money, for instance, to Kenyans. Then also, I think in February or maybe end of January, the Parliament complained that they didn't have the debt register. So they weren't able to get the conditions, the terms, what collateral has government used, and when you mention the holder of securities, I don't know whether this is the office that holds the contracts and these contractual terms and the register. And I think Treasury was given 90 days to publish this. They haven't published. So in your view, do you agree this is a problem? How do we fix it? And how do we get the transparency we need?
Right. Okay, maybe let me start the second part. It's actually called a Register of Government Securities. It's supposed to be an independent office within the PDMO, whose office holder is supposed to be appointed by the Cabinet Secretary. That is one of the reforms that are currently under review, alongside the issue of the independence of the PDMO. To your second question of transparency, and this is actually goes to more than just the PDMO. The PDMO, I think, is on in the light now because of our debt situation. But to the extent that the Constitution gives that oversight power to Parliament, really, I think the solution revolves around what tools and instruments Parliament has to enforce that. Because, for example, there is a debt register, an extent to which it's been requested by Parliament, then that is not a question of the PDMO itself complying or not complying. It's a question of the National Treasury complying to a directive of Parliament. And you can readily appreciate that even if I was the Director General today, the responsibility of responding to a request from Parliament belongs to my Cabinet Secretary. And all we are the principal assistants to him.
Well, Wahoro Ndoho, we want to thank you very much for speaking to us today. It's been a very short interview, but it's a useful one. We want to invite you to come to the studio for like a full 4 hours, so we can talk.
Yes, I think there's a lot.
You can explain to us how we have arrived at 900 billion shillings in debt. Step by step.
And where the money went.
And
the conversation must not be edited.
Yes. Asante sana.
I think I'm editing it.
Asante sana. No, we believe you're not editing it. But having you face to face, we'll be able to tell whether you actually are editing it.
So you can read my body language.
Asante sana. Wahoro Ndoho is the former Director General of the Public Debt Management Office at the National Treasury. We'll have him here again to talk about our national debt, our public debt. Thank you very much, Wahoro. Have a good day.
Karibu, asante.
It's 8 o'clock. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
All right, let's look outbound as you are on Mombasa Road approaching Athi River. There is a vehicle that has blocked the road, so you need to be careful there. Be cautious. We don't want you ramming into anything this morning. All right, let's look at then outbound on Mombasa Road, the airport junction. It's all the way down now towards General Motors, moving very, very slowly this morning. We hope that can open up in a short while. Thika Road is smooth, not so bad this morning, coming then down from Survey to the Pangani Underpass, joining with Kiambu Road and Muthaiga Corner, all as well getting into the CBD to the Globe Cinema roundabout. Doesn't look too terrible, guys. We don't have as much drama as we did yesterday and the day before. But let's keep an eye on it and see how it evolves as the minutes tick by. Don't forget, you can get in touch with us based on what you see. Spice of MKE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. and we'll spread the word.
Kisumu. Traffic. This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room,
It's
witty,
Kenya's
political,
biggest conversation.
engaging.
We broadcast from Nairobi on 94.4. We are worldwide on www.spicefm.co.ke and around the country on our terrestrial frequencies 97.7 in Malindi, 90.9 in Nyeri, 96.7 in Eldoret, 96.0 Nakuru, 102.5 in Kisumu, Mombasa 87.9. You can watch the show as well on YouTube on Spice FM KE, that's our channel, and also on our page on Facebook, Spice FM KE. We're also live streaming on Twitter. We do this every morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Spice FM KE. Let's talk about, as we talk about all issues of governance and policy, we must bring in the political players in this. And the big political players, of course, in the country include the political parties. The Secretary General of, he'll tell us it's the biggest, one of the biggest political parties in the country, Orange Democratic Movement, Kenya, Edwin Sifuna, joins us now on the hot seat in the Situation Room. Good morning, Edwin. Don't speak out. I forgotten to assign you a mic. Now you can. Good morning, Edwin.
Okay, thank you very much for allocating me a mic.
Yes.
It's good to see all of you. Of course, Eric, an elephant does not fret on how you describe its weight. It knows how heavy it is.
That's how we are starting, Edwin.
So, ODM is the largest political party by movement in the region. So, really, it doesn't really matter whether you accept it or not. It's
Largest by movement.
Actually, you would be a
Mm.
very inept Secretary General
If you
you didn't say anything other than what you
expect
just said.
Thank you.
It'll be completely useless.
In fact, you'd have failed if you didn't.
Okay.
Straight out of this. Edwin, welcome to the Situation Room.
Asante.
Good to have you here again.
Asante.
There's a lot that's been happening on the political front. With your handshake partners, Jubilee, you've seen the back and forth. Also, the same has happened with your own political party,
Yes.
the kind of movements that we've seen in Parliament.
Yes.
Some changes of leadership in Parliament. And now there's the reconstitution of parliamentary committees.
Yes.
Where, again, we are seeing you guys doing a whole jig back and forth with your handshake partners. What's that all about?
Well, that's a lot of things to unpack, but maybe we can start with the issue in Parliament. First of all, I think the issue has been blown way out of proportion. Parliamentary committees have been constituted and reconstituted on many occasions in the Houses of Parliament. And it remains a matter of bargain amongst the leadership in Parliament of the various political parties. This is the first time that the majority side is actually ceding leadership of committees to the minority side. And the only, point of departure was, and this was also based out of the experience we had with the Senate Parliamentary Accounts Committee, that indeed you can agree as principals, as a leadership in the House, that we're going to have Eric Latif chairing the Education Committee. But at the end of the day, the committee chairmanship is an elective position. So if you do not then put in place the votes, it becomes difficult for you to, reach that designated point. Because you remember what happened with the Senate PAC with Senator Olekina. We as a majority coalition had designated Kisiga senator Professor Ongeri. But when we got there, our colleagues who are always trying to frustrate the newfound unity between Jubilee and ODM, they voted for somebody else. And it caused all this furor that was totally unnecessary. So I'm happy to say that we have a very competent leadership in the House, led by my chairman, John Badi, and of course, the whip, Junaid Mohammed. They were able to sit down with their colleague and iron out the differences. You don't like me saying these things, but also we have a very serious outrage industry in this country, and it is championed by practitioners in the media. I say so because I think the media are the biggest purveyors of conflict, especially political conflict. Immediately, Honorable Murade, who we have a lot of respect for, spoke. Immediately he spoke. My phone was ringing off the hook. And after you've been in this business a while, you realize what these people are looking for. They're looking for controversy, they're looking for strife, to put it in the headline that somehow the handshake has now collapsed. Because they'll call you and say, oh, so-and-so has said this about this. And then they want to find you in your
Mr. Sifuna,
in your element. And
was
you
the
say,
reporting of what purportedly one Mr. Murade said, was it what he said, or was it a creation?
That's
of
not the point.
Was it a creation?
The reporting was of what he said.
All
But
right.
I'm saying the
And
subsequent conduct
and
of
then
the
you are
media,
sought
when they call
for
and
your
say,
comment.
oh, by the way, Mo, Sifuna said that your
but
glasses
Edwin,
were
they wanted
imported
to-
at 10 million shillings. What do you have to say? Why do I have to have anything to say to that?
You can say,
because
I don't have anything to say.
you cannot respond to everything. I said I have nothing to say because this is not something that is worth the sort of outrage you want to generate. So it is also incumbent upon us not to feed the monster. And I, as SG of ODM, have decided never to feed the monster because there is a very serious outrage industry, and there's many examples. I don't want to go because I'll be opening up the same problem. But the truth of the matter is, as leadership, you can always sit down and have a chat. The ODM leadership in the House, our members of Parliament, they are not desperate for any positions. In fact, these positions were offered to us. You will remember that when we got
So
into...
why wasn't it accepted in immediately?
No,
First list, why do we have
I've
issues?
explained to you, the issue was not even a fight over the committee chairmanship. I've explained to you that the chairmanship is an elective position. So if you then don't put the votes in the respective committees, then really you are doing nothing. And it is very easy for you to be appended like the way we were appended in the Park Committee. The ODM party and all our members understand that this handshake was never about us getting positions. Latif, this handshake is not going to collapse because of committee chairmanship. We have been in this handshake, and from the beginning, we have taken our time very strenuously to explain to everyone that it was not about ODM getting into cabinet. None of us are in cabinet 2.5 years down the line. If this handshake is going to collapse, it is never going to be about positions.
What is
It
it
is
going to be
going to
about?
be about fundamental departures on policy and principle, on the 9 things that we agreed upon that we were going to address with His Excellency the President. You have seen other fringe political parties signing so-called cooperation agreements, and nobody tells you what they're about. You just hear that, oh, so-and-so is supposed to get a cabinet slot.
No, we give it about 4 or 5 months. We gave the handshake 4 or 5 months to know what exactly it was about.
No, because
To be fair.
you refuse to believe what you are reading. You see,
Immediately the handshake happened.
we as a lawyer say when something is
Even
reduced,
you, Edwin, did not know what
no.
the handshake was
now
all
you see,
about.
the problem with you is you want to speak from that side and also from the position of SG.
Because you
I know
said
what
that.
I knew. Because for me, as a lawyer, once an agreement has been reduced into a document, there is a rule that says you cannot introduce oral evidence to explain what the document talks about, because the document will speak for itself.
So are you saying that these recent agreements then do not have such?
So what is the discussion?
what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Where are those things, fundamental
Upon
points
which
or
now
principles
those oral
that
explanations
ones,
are based on?
That those ones. No, I've not seen. We have not even seen those agreements.
That's
So
not
for
because
Because
instance,
you've not seen it, can you assume that it's not
ask
there?
you. Let me ask you a question.
You want us to introduce oral evidence?
Let
to
me
it?
ask you a
That's-
question. I am saying we had an agreement upon which a national discussion began. It was not a secret. It was made public. But still, people, including people on this table, refused to believe that what they were reading is what this thing was about.
Edwin,
They told us for months,
let's
even
not
years,
revise. Let's not revise
that
history. Edwin,
it was about ODM getting into government.
handshake happened in March.
Yes.
And even by the end of March, a senior person in ODMs, the Senator Amos Wako, was asking questions. we do not understand exactly how we are going to implement this handshake, what the details of this
I doubt
handshake
Wako
are.
would agree with you because Wako is a senior advocate.
He did
He's
not.
a senior
he
member
did-
of the party.
He said this in statements. It was covered in the media. He never went to say,
So-
I have been misquoted.
Are you suggesting that this, once again, was a creation of the media?
Correct. Because every time, and we spend so much time, including now, explaining to members of the media that there was no secret deal. We put everything on the table. Everybody could read and see what the MOU was about. If, for instance, we are going to have a falling out, it is going to be on
matters
maybe
of-
reneging on...
Mr. Sifuna, in such matters, do you really, really, honestly ever put everything on the table in the public domain? Really?
Yeah, unfortunately, you see, we have pushed this narrative that politicians can never put all their cards on the table. But those are the cards. There are no other cards. Because we believe that we can actually achieve our political ends if we are able to fundamentally, restructure the politics of this country. That is not a secret.
Can I?
Yes,
my
please.
view is, I think political parties can, hide their cards, play their cards, table their cards,
Yes.
however they want. And I think the reading of Kenyans of the handshake and the BBI process has the response you've gotten, I think, is an indication of the confidence Kenyans have or don't have in the process, and the legitimacy of the process in the eyes
Correct.
of Kenyans.
Correct.
And I think it's pretty low because of the expectation of Kenyans around the parties before the handshake, and the principled or the positions that the parties had taken, particularly the opposition party. There were issues that the opposition party were expected to stand up for in the interest of Kenyans. So my question would be, political negotiation and aside, and positioning aside, and even talking about sharing of seats, how has this helped Kenyans? Because there is no evidence of an opposition. Before the handshake, the opposition was weak. After the handshake, it seems to be totally decimated. We are now we were just discussing 900 billion in debt. We have COVID. We've opened up the economy because the government is broke, cannot support businesses that are unable to operate. We have so we are actually having a likely stronger livelihood impacts still coming. We are having a breakdown of security, like in the city. And I think this was part of the panic of let's open up because people are hungry. Government has failed in its primary responsibility. So how has the handshake helped Kenyans in terms of accountability? Yesterday we had an expert speaking to us saying that on matters of the budget, because the present budget as tabled in Parliament is not responding to the needs of Kenyans around COVID. So we are not seeing an opposition that has come
So
and
like
said,
you're saying, the opposition is dead.
The opposite, apart from a handshake to settle political power, it is not serving Kenyans.
So perhaps
why shouldn't we then
Perhaps I will
conclude it was
start
about power?
Perhaps by asking you how has the handshake settled political power?
Well, to me, I'm saying whatever negotiations that are going and this, kind of kicking people out in seats and putting other people, that is all a political power play. But my question is, how has the handshake helped Kenyans?
Okay, so there's a lot of things that you've covered there, but let me first agree with you that the sort of response that we got from Kenyans towards the BBI process is actually an indication of the confidence that they have in it.
The lack.
Not the lack, because if you followed the BBI process throughout, when the team was put together, they moved across the country. They received views from thousands of Kenyans. There was no place where they went where we had people boycotting the process. All professional bodies, including media, presented their reports there. Political parties did.
Civil society.
Civil society. When the report was unveiled at Bomas, I remember Kenyans cheering on the floor when they were reading things that they could see reflected themselves in what, just arriving at a diagnosis of what the problem is with this project called Kenya. If you do not see that as a plus, then you have deliberately decided to see fault in everything. Number two, as ODM, there is nothing that you can say that has come to us by virtue of that handshake. Zero. Even those speculations that you used to make that Sifuna was going to join into cabinet. I was supposed to be a CS for sport, which I would do well. I am not in cabinet. I am seated here as a leader of an opposition party. So you cannot come then and say that the handshake was about settling political positions. Number 3, what is happening in Parliament right now, and I've made it clear that it is the first time. Because, Jubilee had majority in all committees in the House by virtue of the numbers they have in Parliament. That meant that ostensibly, other than the accountability committees, the
most important
parliamentary
ones,
accounts committees and the investment committee that were traditionally reserved for political parties, all the other committees were actually committees for the Jubilee administration under their leadership. So what has happened in this current conversation is that we realize, because the BBI team has been tasked to filtrate all the views and structure them into views that require maybe constitutional amendments, proposals that require administrative action, proposals that require legislative action. And a bulk of that, for instance, the legislative corrections that need to be made are going to be undertaken through Parliament. Then the question becomes, if my position is so wild as against any debate, it's not to say that we want only pro-BBI people in the committees. We are saying we want people with an open mind who can at least have the discussion and say that this proposal, for instance, to remove taxation from business enterprises run by young people, I don't want to see it because of the following reasons. Or somebody else to say, I think that this proposal is good, but we can also extend it to young people in employment. We want people to have a debate. You understand? So this is what has been informing all this debate about parliamentary leadership. And you will understand that the opposition has certain talents that might well help in this particular debate. For instance, in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, the opposition party, ODM, had proposed that my senior Otende Omolo be the chair. That is a talent that you cannot discount. It is somebody that can be useful in that particular debate. Our Jubilee counterparts still feel that they have talent within their ranks.
Even begun to answer my question.
I will come to what
let's take a break. Let's take a break. Take a look at weather so that you can come and specifically respond to the question of
opposition oversight.
Opposition and the role of the opposition in the
debt and budget.
18 minutes after 8, this is a situation. Ruben Kenya's biggest conversation. We have in the studio with us the Secretary General of ODM Party, Edwin Sifuna. The conversation continues. Good morning.
Right, some people in some parts of Nairobi, cloudy conditions in most parts, though at 15 degrees. We'll see highs of 23 today. Looking into Nyeri, thunderstorms for the afternoon. It's going to be a wet afternoon with highs of 22. Nakuru will see highs of 22 as well, with wet conditions later on today. It's 18 degrees the high in Eldoret, and the rains will come down there later as well. Kisumu currently at 21 degrees is mostly cloudy. We'll see highs of 26 with showers later on as well. 22 degrees the high in Kakamega with showers. Currently mostly cloudy conditions at 17 degrees. Malindi at 26 degrees is mostly cloudy. That'll change later though. The rains will come down with highs of 28 and lows of 24. 24 degrees in Mombasa. Likelihood of rain early on, highs of 29 and lows of 24. Take a step out into Kampala, where at 24 degrees the high today, we'll have wet afternoon with with lows of 18. And in Dar es Salaam, light rain showers already coming down, changing to thunderstorms later with highs of 28 and lows of 23. Further down south in Joburg, at 7 degrees, we'll see highs of 17 with clear and sunny conditions all through the day. And finally, for now in Lagos, thunderstorms predicted for most of the day well into Thursday with highs of 27 and lows of 23.
So, Edwin, how effective are you as the largest opposition party in Parliament?
I would say that we have been effective in what it is that we expected to do. This refrain that the opposition is dead is something that we have had to deal with for the past 2.5 years. Our response always has always been that when you change tact, you have not changed who you are, or you have not changed what your destination is, or what it is that you think is right, or what you think is wrong. I have said as SG, we have experienced this. Noise as a tactic is overrated. We made a lot of noise, which is what I believe people expect to see from opposition parties. For instance, about the construction of the SGR. The rail was still built. We made a lot of noise about the Northern Collector Tunnel, Eurobond, all these things. Yeah. So, isn't it the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing and expecting different results? So, when you change tact, you have not changed who you are or abdicated your role. We have had certain successes just because of this change of tact. Many would argue that there has been a bit of some vigor, for instance, in the war against corruption, because of the sort of, we always argued that what was lacking was a political will. And your political will comes from certain political strength. When you have been taken hostage by certain political forces, it is very difficult for you as a person in administration to do a few things. It can be argued, and we argue rightly so as ODM, that this particular pact between the two leaders actually gave the president some strength to be able to pursue things like corruption in government, because they were happening in his own administration.
Are you saying that in the absence of this pact, we would not have seen the fight against corruption take the steps that it has taken now?
I am saying
he would not have gone forward in the way he's gone.
In the past, correct.
That's
what I'm saying.
EACC, for example, would not have gone forward in the way in which they're going?
That's exactly what I'm saying, because we were all here in the first 5 years of Jubilee. And we were saying that corruption, everything is in place except the political willpower to be able to pursue these people without political consequence, because these are people within government. These are people who participated in the formation of government. So we have seen some developments. For the first time, we are seeing convictions.
So this is because of your backing.
This is because of our backing.
That the president felt now I can
Correct.
go all out.
It is an insurance for him to be able to say the entire country now has solidly come behind. And do you remember that
because
just
you know
let me
that
finish.
political
Let
will
me
not
finish.
crumble.
Let me finish. Of the 9-point agenda, I think one of them was the enhancement of the war against corruption. That political backing is what guarantees you that if you go even against your closest friends who are partaking of corruption, nothing will happen to you politically, because you have that insurance.
You know, you need to be very careful, because when you say that you needed the handshake for the war on corruption to proceed, you're then actually telling us the biggest, our political leaders, our political class is our biggest liability.
But that is
simply because.
But that is a fact.
What does he need
That
to be
is
careful
I don't
with?
need to be careful to say that. You see.
Let me say, it's a
fact.
We should be talking about removing the political class.
Let me say this. Let me say this.
Let me finish, because you've also spoken. If the political class is our biggest liability, isn't then the BBI a process of appeasing our political class? Is the problem not that the political class is pursuing an agenda that is not in the direct interest of, or rather is not prioritizing?
You walked right into that one.
No.
Let me finish my point, because I just
Is it
want
a point or a question? Because I
it is
came
a
to
question.
answer a question.
It is a question.
Yeah.
I want to reiterate.
And I want to answer a question.
Yeah, but I want to reiterate my question.
Yes.
And my question again is this. We go to the economy. This is where it is hurting.
Yeah.
And as the opposition, what has the handshake delivered for Wanjiko? Our debt has gone up every year. Our debt has gone up every year, even during the handshake. We now have a budget. We now have a COVID crisis. And the priority of this handshake government appears to be to settle the BBI as opposed to settling livelihoods. We then have a budget that gives 58 billion shillings to the COVID response, as opposed to the recommendations that have been made that we need a stabilization budget. So I put it to you, and this is why I was saying, is the handshake about just the political settlement and appeal appeasement, or is it about Kenyans? And you
Okay.
still haven't answered the question.
So
What's the
if
economic?
you will allow me, by the time you
Economic-
leave the studio, you'll have answers. But the problem with you is you want to have the interview, and yet I'm the interviewee.
No, the
So your
question-
question is understood. Can
Which-
I answer
which
the
is my
question?
question. I'm
Can I
asking about
answer
the
question?
economic.
Yes.
Okay,
So let me
economic.
answer the question.
So,
let me
in
answer
the
the
You
question.
were going, step
Let
by
me-
step
yes,
by answering.
let me answer the question.
effectiveness of ODM
Yeah,
as an
let
opposition
me answer the question.
in this new
In-
arrangement.
in economic matters.
So you have started with corruption, and corruption is
the beauty
done.
of the times.
Let's go now into-
into
beauty
the
of-
economy.
The beauty of now is that I have dealt with
Corruption.
not corruption. I have dealt with people like her before who want to focus on one thing
Her name is
and
Wanjiru.
say yes.
My name is Wanjiru, and
Yeah,
I want to be specific. I
it's-
don't
it's
like
okay.
generalities.
It's okay.
Generalities
You see,
don't
at
help.
The, at
I
the end
don't-
of the day,
So you answer the
at
question.
the end of the day,
Economics,
you will pose a question
budget.
and I will answer the question.
Thank
Okay,
you.
answer
So
the question.
if you are not satisfied, you can always look for somebody
No,
else and
I'm
ask them
sure
that
you're
question.
very capable.
So this is what I'm going to tell you.
Uh-huh.
Wanjiru, policy, government, budgeting is the responsibility of the people you elected, the people you gave the mandate. You will not walk through your door, past your dog, with a thief into the house and then start blaming the dog for not barking. The dog saw you walk with a thief in the house. Our responsibility as a watchdog over public resources
As
is
the
to
dog
say,
in this case.
as the dog in this case, who we walked past with a thief and we saw you, is to say that no, we believe that this could be done better, this could be done in a different way. When we have the instruments of power, you can actually direct those questions you're asking to me.
You do have the
So,
instrument.
in fact, what needs to happen, and,
In your-
and,
in
and
your
I want
watchdog
to
role,
understand,
now,
just a minute.
even you now, you
let
need
me
to focus
complete
your
my
answer.
let me complete
Give
my
us a
thought.
clear
If
answer.
you don't let me complete my thought, we will not have an interview. What I'm saying is this. In the budget that you're talking about, first of all, everybody understands and appreciates that this government is cash strapped. We have gotten into debt because we were taking debt not during the handshake time, but prior even to the handshake,
And continuing.
to get into projects that were not going to give back to the economy.
Yep.
Where were you when ODM was saying SGR was not a viable project? Where were you when we were saying that this Eurobond money, we cannot see the specific projects that this money was directed at?
We were in this
Where
country.
were you?
We
You
were
were
in this
here.
country. We
So
were
don't
cheering
act
you on.
like you've come from Mars.
So we were cheering
because
you on.
we have played that
Yeah.
role and
So-
we have gotten ourselves into this ditch. We have said, how can we get ourselves out of this
This
ditch?
is the answer.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we have agreed that there are certain fundamental things that encourage this sort of impunity, that encourage theft, that encourage people channeling money into projects that are not necessarily beneficial to the economy. So can we have a discussion about moving this country forward? Can we remove corruption, for instance? How better can we empower our devolved units to be able to deliver to the people? Now, if you do not think that addressing these fundamental issues that, by the way, have bugged us from the time of independence up to today, then really, I don't know what it is your expectation is.
So in the
Honorable Sifuna,
first
I
5
put it
years,
to you, you are very capable at answering, giving a response, but not answering. My question was specific, and in fact, you have added another level to my question
repeat
because
the,
you've
repeat the
talked-
question and now
My
specifically,
question,
so that
my
he answers
specific
specific.
question was:
Yes.
we have gotten ourselves into
no.
an economic.
What is the
That is
question?
not a question,
That's not a
Wanjiru.
question.
Wanjiru.
Yeah.
What has the handshake delivered in terms of the economic rescue of this country, economic rescue of devolution? Because by your
Correct.
own admission,
Yeah.
devolution is a key pillar of the political of ODM and also of the
Okay, so
policy
can I answer-
agenda.
Okay.
So
Let
what
me
has
let me
been
answer that
delivered?
question, then we
specific
look at
question.
traffic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wanjiku, you do not know what
Wanjiru.
Wanjiru, you do not know what the handshake was about. You have not read the document.
I have read the
You have not read the
I'm
document.
not asking
because there
about
is
the
nowhere-
documents.
There is
So-
nowhere in
I'm
the
asking-
handshake agreement
Excuse me.
where it is said that ODM was coming to rescue the economy.
No,
we said
your
that we
job
were
as the
coming.
opposition.
No. You have said the handshake.
Oh,
The handshake. We are discussing the handshake.
why are we having a conversation that's not about issues?
Let him finish this. So
No,
I
no,
want to
but-
take a traffic break.
But then why are we
Can I
having
answer
a
the question?
conversation?
Answer the
Is
question. Take a
BBI
break.
not?
Let me answer the
answer the
question.
You know,
My
I
question
think
was
Wajiro-
about the opposition.
Yes, it's about
No,
the
you
opposition.
said the handshake.
I
and the
said
And then you
BBI.
said handshake.
Yeah.
vis-a-vis
So
the.
let's-
let
can
me
we
clarify.
all
Can I
focus? Can we
can
all
I
focus the
clarify?
question?
Can I
Okay.
please clarify my question?
Right.
So that
Are you asking the question
so
to
that Honorable
ODM?
Sifuna can decide to answer or not, and he can evade
There
it
is
or
an
not.
answer she
and
wants,
maybe,
but I don't have that
and
answer.
maybe he's
Answer.
not
There is a-
hearing.
maybe she
Ask
should
the
just
question.
answer
Maybe
the
you're
question.
not hearing
because
me,
I think
or you
there is
don't want to
something she
answer.
wants to hear.
My
Ask the
question
question.
is
Yeah,
this.
Yes.
And my initial proposition was the handshake was about a political settlement.
Really?
To appease.
Which is wrong, of
Which
course.
is my you know,
Perception.
and I'm saying
Because you have not read
and for
it.
me, I-
Wajiro,
You haven't
Wajiro,
Hold on.
narrow down to the
yeah,
question.
no. And for me, I say
Don't give the context
No,
again,
no.
because we are losing the
Hold
question
on.
in the context.
Hold on. And for
Go
me, I
straight
say
to the question.
I don't have a problem with political parties settling their political issues. I don't have a problem. My question is, this handshake, what is it delivering for Wanjiko?
Yeah, what was it expected to deliver? Then we will go to specifically what it has
specifically,
delivered.
it was supposed to bring improved oversight.
Where is that in the
this
document?
oversight, no,
Where?
It's logical.
Where?
It's your mandate.
No,
It has
no,
a
no,
9-point
no.
agenda.
It has a 9-point agenda, Wanjiru. Read
Oh,
it.
I
guess-
see. Does it
Read
does
it.
it
The
absorb
question
your
then would be-
constitutional
No, just read it.
responsibility of
Read it.
oversight?
We are going to refocus this question, and I'll ask the question this
Yeah.
way. What has ODM,
Yeah.
as the largest opposition party
Yeah.
in parliament, done in its role as the opposition party
Well,
to manage this? And I want you to,
to
answer
manage
this.
what specifically? Because
The
there's like
economic-
a raft of issues that
it's the economic-
have
economic
The oversight
crisis.
role in
the
parliament.
period,
You've told us, so you've come and
Economic
be able, you've
here-
been able to anchor
here's
the
what
president.
here's what you need to understand as well, Eric. And I'm sure people will say I'm running away from the question. The oversight role over the executive is a role of parliament. It is not a role of an opposition party.
Yep.
This is a presidential system we are in. So you need to understand that parliament in its entirety is the organ that is supposed to oversight the executive in a presidential system.
Irrespective
Now-
of whether they share the same party.
Just a minute.
Yes.
Here is where the handicap came in. And I always want to remind people of where we have come from. In 2013, there was a so-called tyranny of numbers in Parliament. And the problem we experienced during that time is that members of Parliament elected, especially on the majority party, felt that they were part of the executive. And it was very difficult.
Yep.
It was very difficult to oversight the executive then because they felt that they were part of it. You remember, even the constitutional protections that have been woven in and the tools that have been given to Parliament to oversight the executive were actually neutered. You will remember there was a time when a member of Parliament was supposed to present a motion of censure against a CS and he disappeared to some lodge in Naivasha, or they were called to State House and told, oh, this is not what is supposed to happen. This is a government minister. You cannot touch her. So I want to pose it to you that Parliament as of its as an entity,
the
and you
entire
will remember
entity of the
that the
legislature
majority party
is the governing
has
party.
always had the ability to be able to shut you down. I always bring people back to the, you remember the Security Laws Amendment Bill?
Yep.
When it was being forced through Parliament, ODM and the members of NASA at that particular moment, we fought literally on the floor of the House not to claw back the gains that we had gotten after achieving multi-party and the new constitution. It is ODM that filed the case in court that ensured that the laws that were forcibly passed by the majority party and by Muturi, then the speaker, were actually, declared null and void.
So let me take-
So
let's
it
take
is
a-
not. It is not
Let's
to
take
say.
a break.
done.
It is
Let's
not
take
to,
a break.
Yes.
Take a look at traffic, because you've done very well. You've actually given us the
No,
foundation.
I'm not here
of reminding us-
to be. I'm
be
not being
patted on the
audited.
back? Okay,
I'm not
fine.
being audited.
No, you are.
I know myself.
You must be
I know the
You
work
are.
that I
You
do.
must
I
be
know I am
audited.
good at what I do because
must
I know
be
what I
audited.
do.
Yes, but you are being audited.
It's not
we
about
are taking
that.
a break. We are
Yeah?
taking a break. Come take a look at traffic, and then we come back, and you now answer after the handshake in this second term
Yes.
of this administration.
Yes.
And your role in Parliament. We
Okay.
can remember everything that you
That's
did.
fine.
And we are looking
That's
for
fine.
such kind of things that you were doing the last time, what you're doing now.
That's fine.
Okay?
Yeah.
26 minutes to 9 o'clock. It's a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room with us this morning is the ODM Secretary General, Edwin Sifuna. Let's take a look at traffic.
All right, So it seems to be a bone of contention this morning, all the way from Survey, really, technically, all the way to the Globe Cinema roundabout today, and that bridge is going to be a problem today. Traffic is chock-a-blocked. And then all the roads joining on from Kiambu Road to Muthaiga Corner to the Pangani Underpass, where, surprise, surprise, there's an accident there this morning. So nothing's going to be moving for a while now. It's going to be very, very slow. Other parts of the city seem to be looking pretty good. We shouldn't have much problems there. Let's look at the Embu-Nairobi highway. For some reason, there's some heavy traffic there in and outbound, and that's not too far from the city. So that will be a point to watch for a short time now. We'll let you know as that develops. Spice MKE, that's how you can reach us on Twitter. Let us know what it is that you see. But for now, everything looks generally pretty good.
We continue the conversation with Edwin the Secretary General of ODM. Yes, you rightfully so reminded us that it's the role of Parliament as an institution to be the watchdog. Okay, and clearly, like you've also said, many members of the current Parliament, and even in the previous Parliament, had forgotten their role. They still think that they are answerable to the executive and the people who are in the executive.
Yes.
Now let's come into this term.
Correct.
And we're seeing what's happening in the country in terms of governance.
Yes.
Laws coming into Parliament and some laws passing, some proposals, for example, to increase the debt ceiling, and they change the debt ceiling from percentage to an absolute figure.
Yes.
And the participation of your party in voting for such issues.
Yes.
And that's where the questions keep arising. Previously, maybe we would have seen a different opinion emanating from ODM members on the floor of the House on such a matter.
Okay, I think the expectation I get from you is that the opposition is there to oppose. Like there is no proposal that can be made reasonably from government and that you can actually buy into what they are trying to tell you.
Nope.
I am not an economist, but I remember the entire debate about was it the VAT and also the debt ceiling that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I remember the conversation very vaguely because I'm not an economist again, but it was clear to us at least that on the VAT tax, if we were not going to be able to plug the gap, the deficit in the budget, then we were not going to have a budget, and probably the entire economy would collapse or something like that. And I have said I'm not an economist, so it is very rudimentary understanding of what it was.
Members of Parliament had opposed to reintroduction of VAT on petroleum on fuel.
What has happened is
what has happened is by any member of Parliament.
What has happened is we have also made proposals that the debt ceiling, for instance, is not a blank check for Treasury to be able to just borrow without reference to the representative of the people. If you look at the proposals that ODM made to the BBI committee, we said that parliamentary approval is something that is critical, that has to be woven into the entire debt process. That Parliament, as a representative of people, must be, it has to be explained to them that this is the purpose of the debt, this is how we're going to service it, and this is how it is going to benefit the economy.
So more
as opposed to
just
to introduce more transparency into the entire debt process. So it is not a blank check that was given to them. And by the way, cooperation between political parties does not mean that you have abdicated your role. I have been to countries where even the minority party, because of the cooperation they have with even the larger parties, you end up with the prime minister coming from the minority party. Cooperation does not mean that every time I agree with what you say, but opposition does also mean that everything that you put on the table is
wrong.
bad.
Yeah.
I think that is the sort of politics we want to get away from. As I said, we want to keep an open mind, have a debate, convince me, I convince you, and I say, by the way, this is better. Even in this entire...
Have we seen in the last 2 years, just to stick on this point, have we seen in the last 2 years a bill brought to Parliament which has been proposed by the executive, and then ODM sat and engineered amendments to that bill that went contrary to what had initially been proposed?
There are thousands of bills. Even today, let me just give you an example. There is a statute law miscellaneous amendments bill, and they have asked for our views on many bills. I will give you the example that is easiest to come to me on the political parties fund. For instance, they have decided that because we have no money, it is not going to be possible for them to comply with the current law. They want to change the law in such a drastic way that it would reduce maybe the fund by over 2/3. And then we put it to them that we are negating all the gains that we have made as a multi-party democracy, that this is not going to be good for us. These things happen on the floor of the House all the time. I'll give you another incident and bring in also the perspective of the purveyors of conflict. There was a very recent debate on coronavirus support. And when my minority whip, Junaid Mohammed, stood up and he made it very clear that he was not happy with how the government is getting COVID support to the grassroots. And Senator Orengo repeated the same thing on the floor of the Senate. The next day on the Standard headline is the handshake under threat. Because I have told you there are people who have invested in conflict.
You're behaving out of step, that's why.
That if Sifuna today says that he does not agree with this, instead of looking at
back to my question specifically,
my point, they want to look at it in the greater context
a law
the marriage between these two people.
Correct. A law that was brought to Parliament as a bill,
in
a certain form,
amendments
introduced and not forcefully, but very well articulated by the opposition that we need this amendment. Amendment adopted by the House goes to the president and passes. Give me one.
By ODM. There are many. I don't have the list here. But there are many, Eric.
In the last 2 years?
No, I can't recall all of them, but there are quite a number. It's not as if our legislators go to sleep.
Can I also ask a question?
Do you know the best legislator, for instance, for presenting bills to the houses of to the Senate is actually the nominated Senator Agnes Zani. She's the one who her most recent bill. I can remember at least the ones that we were discussing a few weeks ago. The one on community health workers. So, I mean, it is not as if it's a great bill. And it is, by the way, you do not brag about your work. This is the job that people are taken to Parliament to do. So I cannot come here with a list and say, this is what our members of Parliament do. That's their job. That's why you pay them. So it is, don't expect plaudits for doing what you are paid to do.
Can I then ask a question? Because I think you're answering the questions around the political quite well, but on the, I want to reframe our question. As the ODM party, now that you're operating under the handshake, does it mean you don't have your own independent position on the budget process? Does it mean you don't have your own independent position on the debt process and the economic crisis facing Kenya? Because from all your answers, it implies this is not a priority for you.
No, I don't think
for the party.
I don't think that anybody has said.
My last point is the Parliamentary Budget Office itself has flagged the economic crisis and the risks around debt. And the problem with the present budget. From your answer, it looks like ODM might be too distracted with handshake, BBI issues, and is not paying attention.
No, I think to be fair to me, because first of all, I'm not a member of Parliament, and I've also told you that I'm not an economist. I want to give an assurance here. Just a minute. I'll give an assurance here that I will get just a minute. I will get
the laws.
No. I will get my chairman, who is also a member of the budget committee and a member of Parliament, to come and sit here because he is well versed in these things that you're talking about and the sort of interventions that have been made, especially in the budget making process. He has a very close relationship with the budget office, a member of the budget committee. I can get you any other member of the budget committee. They will give you all these things in the format in which that you want them. I think that is fair. But as a Secretary General, I have a general understanding of these things, but if you want details and nitty-gritty, that's why we have a party that has organs. I have a Secretary for Parliamentary Affairs, who's the Honorable Junaid Mohammed. He can give you all these things. He has a list of all the bills that we have proposed and passed. So it is not to say that ODM is not a priority. The only thing that I was telling you is that the handshake, if you read and understood it, had nothing to do with the things that you're talking about.
It did.
We had a greater conversation about this union called Kenya, and we said, let's start from 1963, find out where the rain started beating.
It's about the
us.
fabric.
That's what it's about the fabric of society. And we actually believe that if we're able to sort out some of these things, and even when we talk about the economy, some of the proposals that have come through the BBI process are positive proposals to be able to help young entrepreneurs to come up through the ranks, to put positive governmental measures that help businesses to thrive.
There's a whole chapter on economic
that's what I'm saying. So you cannot rubbish and say that.
So Edwin, whereas public perception may have been that the handshake then was to get more and more people at the seat of power.
Yeah.
What you are saying essentially is that it is Kenya, the union
Correct.
of Kenya at large that was being taken into consideration when those two hands came
Yeah,
together.
that's what I'm saying, because you see, that perception, that perception has actually been fomented by opponents of the handshake. People who every day wake up to try and see what sort of rifts they can put in between this particular process. Because I can tell you, the Kenya that exists now is deliberate because it benefits certain people. The death of meritocracy is deliberate in this country because it benefits the people who do not put in merit. So the people who want to, when the country decides that now we want to start this discussion about meritocracy and how people earn things, how do you become wealthy, how does Sifuna drive this car? There are people who don't want to have that conversation because they know at the end they are not going to be part of the new country where meritocracy counts. Yeah. So of course they will try. They will try and put obstacles on the way.
Mr.
But
Sifuna,
it's such a noble cause.
Mr. Sifuna,
Yes.
all these things that you say sound really good, and the engineer hope.
Yes.
Our problem has never been this in this country.
Yes.
Organizing our thoughts, determining what should be done.
Yes.
The implementation stage is always the issue.
Yes.
How will ODM ensure that we actually implement these things that we have put so wonderfully on paper?
Fantastic. I was watching a documentary called Human Life, and it is just about genetic engineering and how it can help us to combat like these critical diseases and so on and so forth. And one of the doctors was saying that when you are a student, you think everything is known. So you go to class expecting to be told everything. But there are places that no one has looked. It is possible that all this time, in the foundation and the building of this country, we have tried everything. That is a perception out there. That it is always the same business. That you people come together, you put all these nice things on the table, but the implementation always
falls short.
It falls short. That does not mean that we should stop trying. My brother, there are places people have not looked. There are things that have not been tried. There are forces that have not come together. There are players who are not born yet.
My question is specific.
No, I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you.
My question is specific.
That's what I'm telling you. I want to give you hope.
I already have hope.
Yeah, it is possible.
Hope I already have.
Possible.
In the BBI.
It is possible. It is possible for you to try and fail 100 times.
No.
But the 101st time,
you could succeed.
You know, the question I'm asking
is
straightforward and, in my opinion, simple.
Yes.
ODM must have a plan.
Yes.
They must have an idea of what it is they want to do to ensure these things get done.
Okay, so here's the idea. Here's the idea, because even this wider conversation you had about committees, for instance, it is a path. It is a path because we are saying Kenyans have given fantastic views on the country they want to see. So how do you implement these things? They don't want the BBI report to end up like the other reports. And they have said as much. They don't want it to be like the TJRC is gathering dust on some shelves. So how is it that you put in place these ideas? We have spoken about, as politicians, gender inclusion for the past, I don't know how many years. People have proposed certain frameworks to try and see that this country actually empowers its women. So how do we achieve it? The ideas are there. So when you see us insisting that we would like to see certain things put in place, because they are the stepping stones to be able to get you to that dream that Kenyans have.
And they're the safeguards.
And the safeguards. So don't make noise and say
so you're saying we wait.
Sifuna being...
So you're saying it's kind of like watch this space.
Just watch
can
this
we be in a
space.
watch? We can be in a watch.
It's not
watch
trust,
this space position for a while.
No, but it's not a watch this space because
what
you
is
are
it? Is
participants.
it a reality that we are?
You are
that now,
participants in the process.
yeah, sure, but
Yeah.
are we saying that it's something that's going to come? Because if we look back to the people for which you say it is important, again, the Union of Kenya, the public perception, which you alluded to in the very beginning, is that, okay, there really isn't much that's happening for us.
Yeah.
There isn't really much that's happening for the development of this country.
Yeah.
So how long then? In terms of this plan, when is it actually going to come to the surface, cut through for people to see this is actually happening in our time?
This is what I will say.
Put those thoughts together, Sifuna, so that you can come and now respond to them specifically in what CT is considering, in his opinion, a very simple question, which therefore requires a very simple answer.
Simple, straightforward response.
Yeah, and at the same time, we're helping City Muga to transport some cargo from Guangzhou in China to the port of Mombasa. We're giving him the what is needed. If you just look at the screen behind you, this is a new platform by KPA, Kenya Ports Authority. It's Captain Cargo. It's kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo. There are steps. These are the steps that you require to know about importation and clearing of your goods at the cargo at the port when they arrive. We are already at step number 6.
Right, so KPA has sent, or rather KRA has sent the manifest back to KPA at this point. So you have nothing to worry about. So moving forward, KRA, we're assuming this is a seamless process, approves the manifest, tick, and shares with what they call the Ken Trade and Partner State Revenue Authority. This is transit cargo, right? So these are guys who are moving your stuff, So they get this manifest. They're all right with it. Now, the approved manifest is now distributed by Kentrade to KPA and partner government agencies. These partner government agencies are those agencies that need to be involved in the process, commercially, administratively,
Do they
whatever.
have names?
They have names, but right now we're not
Through
going.
Kentrade, actually, you'll be able to access now
And figure
what
out
is
who is
called
who.
the National Single Window System. And the National Single Window System is where you get in and you're able now to communicate with KRA, with all the
If
other
you have a
agencies that
question,
you
there
need
will be
to.
somebody that can answer it for
Yeah,
you.
the other partner government agencies. So it's just one portal again. You're not moving from where you are. Still there. Point number 9, step
All right.
9.
So CNF obtains a manifest number from the shipping agent. Remember, in step number 1, we already knew who the shipping agent was, and they've lodged your entry. So now your stuff is actually coming. They've lodged your entry with KRA and your partner state revenue authorities, again, your transit cargo. So once this manifest number is gotten, it's lodged, so you're ready to go. There should be no hiccups then along the way.
In the next hour, CT, your cargo is with you in Nairobi. Keep it right here. It's 10 minutes to 9. The conversation continues right here. We have Edwin Sifuna, the Secretary General of ODM Party. Now, do you have the simple answer to CT's simple question?
I think we got direct. What was the question again, CT? Okay, I think I understood your question, CT. I don't think that it is also your expectation that I will come and
Give specifics.
lay out the
Actually,
entire plan.
I actually do. What I expect you to tell me is give me the broad strokes.
Yeah. So this is what we were discussing. We were saying you have to put in place the tools and the stepping stones that will be able to...
The mechanism begins with what we're seeing happening in Parliament now.
Correct. I believe it is critical, for instance, to have parliamentary committees that are going to debate these bills that are going to be proposed, that are objective, that are not there to rubber stamp. They are not there to reject in total. They are there to have an honest conversation, and this conversation, I believe, will happen in public. It is not. It's not going to be a secret, and there will be input because public participation has not ended with the presentation of that report. So that we will still have opportunity to input as members of the things that you want to see in your lifetime. Problems have persisted. There are generations upon generations that have been working on these problems. In the medical field, for instance, people are still looking for the cure for cancer. They pray and believe and wish that they see the cure in their lifetime. We have similar problems in this country. It is akin to a cancer because we went wrong at inception. At the birth of this country, there's things that we got fundamentally wrong. It is going to take time to do what? To rectify them.
How long?
Every generation. This is the point I'm making, City, is that we might not see these things even in my lifetime or in my children's lifetime. That we have a country.
Give me examples of these things that we might not see in our lifetime.
Can I just add on with
Yes.
respect to the BBI and given that you've talked about problems and these are generational problems, our concern, and I read the report because there's something I was looking for in terms of what is this core issue that is undermining all our processes. And one overriding concern, and that has become very evident, is this issue of state capture. And the BBI has a lot of very kind of small problems, big problems, and it kind of alludes to some of the fundamental but doesn't square on. So could my concern is that as ODM shook hands, they may have then brushed aside a core problem. For instance, the recentralization of Nairobi has, if you've looked at the reports and you look at the analysis, there are interests around that. And these are, okay, let me make it simple.
Wanjiru, the question.
With conflict of interest, state capture, interest of the first family, around the economy, decisions that this government has made around SGR, around Nairobi County, benefiting, benefiting the first family while the opposition doesn't bring this to light and doesn't take a stance to salvage our
Wanjiru,
economy.
let me tell you, I have said it here. Noise as a tactic is overrated. You can make noise, but it might still be that. Just a minute. Let me finish. It might be that the people that you are, trying to correct are so entrenched
are not distracted at all by
correct
your noise.
By your noise. They will still do what they have to do. Here's the problem. When I was speaking about generations, I was saying each generation makes a contribution towards solution of a problem. If you are deliberate about it, the problem, for instance, you're describing starts from major problems like as a country. The question that was posed even to us during the BBI process: what is Kenya's national ethos? Who are we as a people? What is it? What are the things that we pride ourselves in? What are we known for? When you come to a problem like tribalism, I would very much like to live in a country that is free of tribalism, where every child, regardless of their name, has the same opportunity to better themselves, to access all these things that we see other people accessing. Is it something that I would like to see in my lifetime? Yes. Is it something that you are guaranteed to see in your lifetime? No. But can we make certain steps in that direction? I believe, for instance, I voted for the first time in 2002. By the way, the faith that I had that I was kicking tribalism out of this country, I was voting for Kikuyu, knowing he was a Kikuyu. Because we were kicking out the Kanu system. But look at what happened immediately. It wasn't more than 6 months. We were being told, by the way, certain tribes are used to being in opposition, even being in government, they're very uncomfortable, they should leave. Things like those. Tribalism is what breeds chronism, is what breeds those state capture, because you can imagine a government entity transacting business in one language. In one language, it's just Luyas here. We just speak, I know your father from your village, so on and so forth. If there's a tender for SGR, I say, si unakuanga na kokoto. Ile kwari ya baba ilifunga. I give you the tender. Wewe si ulikuanga na ile nini ya transformer. Shika. That is how state capture happens. So if we don't have the wider conversation of how do we defeat this cancer, it might not happen in my lifetime. I might not see it. My kids might not see it. But we as a generation can say we struck 2 blows in this war.
Now, what are these 2 blows that ODM hopes to strike?
We'll answer that question. We're going to the top of the hour, and we need to do at least this particular ritual that we have to do. Today's proverb. Tell Edwin today's proverb.
Be a mountain or lean on one.
You're even writing it down.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I want to appreciate its full
its
full.
entirety.
Yes.
The largest of it.
Yes.
Okay.
It's coming up to 9 o'clock. We have in the studio with us Edwin Sifuna. We'll ask him to stay with us at least for another 10 minutes into the next
Correct.
hour, right? To respond to that question, and then also to talk about ODM and accountability.
And how we are leaning on a
and
mountain.
how you're leaning on a mountain.
Or how you are a mountain.
And how you are a mountain. It's a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Good morning. It's coming up to 9 o'clock. Remember, you can watch our live stream on YouTube, Spice FM KE, or Facebook and Twitter, Spice FM KE.
All right, it's looking much better this morning. Still have a few problems on Thika Road, but it shouldn't take us well beyond 9:30 or so. Everywhere else seems to have been flowing quite smoothly. Don't have as much problems as we would have a couple of days ago, unless something does pop up. If it happens in your neck of the woods, let us know. Remember, Spice FM KE on Twitter. Let us know what you see, but for now, you should be able to get where you're going without too much of a headache.
Spice up your life. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Traffic. This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T.
All right,
Muga,
the conversation continues.
researcher,
Remember, we are
academic,
broadcasting from
seasoned
Nairobi,
political
94.4.
observer, a
We are
fountain
in
of
the
wisdom
Mombasa
in these
87.9,
politically uncertain
102.5
times.
in Kisumu,
New
Nakuru,
Ogo,
96.0,
Nigerian by birth,
96.7 in
Kenyan
Eldoret,
by choice,
Malindi,
communications expert,
97.7
Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and
We
believer
have,
in people
Aston
power,
Gracious
and
Stay with us.
Eric Latin,
This is the ODM
agent provocateur, the man in the
Edwin
chair,
Sifuna.
seasoned
What do you
journalist,
think?
news
Rephrase
hound,
my
a
question.
man who believes in
To give
punching
it a
up,
bit of better
not
context.
down.
One sentence.
This is the Situation Room, the only
a process of deferring accountability of the president and the violation of the constitution around 27 election, around weakening of the judiciary, around the various
So
transgressions.
deferring
against,
accountability
is
of
the
the
BBI not
presidency
just
or the particular president.
this particular, is it not
All right.
just deferring accountability in the same way that it was deferred after 2007? Again, we had a process where the political leaders didn't quite take account. And now again, we had another situation and BBI again is coming. So isn't our problem that we never say, hey, the buck stops with you?
Okay. First of all, the BBI is not deferring accountability on the 2017 elections. In fact, it is the foundation of the BBI. The fact that every time we have elections, we get ourselves into the sort of, pickle that we got ourselves in. If you read the document,
I
Wanjiru,
have
think you have the wrong document.
No,
because
I've read the
what I will
documents.
do,
Please don't
I want
trivialize
to,
my questions
I want to,
because I have
just
read
a minute,
the documents.
I want to hand you my copy.
I have read
because
the
probably
documents.
and I also want to see your copy because the issue of 2017 elections,
When you
is
invalidate an opposing point
Is
of
one
view.
of
just a
the-
minute.
one of the key
The
factors.
9 points,
One of the points
divisive
is that-
elections.
Yeah.
Excuse
Divisive
me.
elections is one of them, and it has brought about this broader conversation of accountability of the IEBC. Is it not a result of that BBI process that there is now a recommendation to disband the current IEBC and change the formula of nomination of commissioners to the IEBC.
If I'm just to take
it is
Wanjiro's
there.
question,
Number
is
two,
that-
on
is-
the
is
question of
focusing on IEBC not the wrong person to
No,
focus
no,
on?
no.
Why,
As opposed to
who
the-
interfered with IBC?
Just
The
a
president.
minute. Just
Who
a
killed
minute.
Chris Musando?
Just a minute. When we talk
Why
about
not go for that
accountability
answer?
for elections, the person, the issue of who killed Chris Musando is a
Okay,
question.
maybe
is
a
a question for the
bit out.
DCI.
It's an
Right.
I mean,
investigative
But let's
question.
talk about
people who stole
interference.
our elections, we know who stole our elections. It is in the public domain. We know who interfered with the systems. Yesterday, I was reading
So why
the
aren't we
Standard
holding them
newspaper.
accountable?
So, what is it that you want? Because we have had a conversation about doing things better in a way that will move this country forward. Because if
I put it
ODM,
For long term.
if ODM decides to
No.
stick there, yesterday in the Standard newspaper, and I'm glad you even reminded me, the Standard newspaper was talking about regrets for
ODM.
For not taking part in the second
There
poll.
are no regrets in ODM, and I know the Standard never spoke to ODM. They spoke to some of our so-called former partners. ODM has no regret for boycotting the repeat election. It cannot be compared to the situation with Malawi, because in Malawi, even the head of the Electoral Commission owned up to his mistakes and stepped down
resigned.
to allow the country to go into a repeat process without the baggage. We laid down certain irreducible minimums, including saying, how can the people who messed up,
So the
the
person
same
in charge
people
ought to have
in
stepped
charge,
down.
number one,
Be in
the people
charge
who
for the
provided the
repeat.
technology,
you're
Otimofo,
talking.
I mean,
you're talking.
don't, I
So
don't have
why-
to say
why
these
have these
things so that
issues?
you know.
I-
Let me
can
come
I-
to the issue of the
sorry.
judiciary.
No.
Let me
yeah.
come to the issue of the judiciary, because you
Let-
said we are also
No, Wanjiro,
protecting.
I think we're getting the
Yeah.
gist of your
Let me
answer.
let me say something on the judiciary. Less than 2 weeks ago, the party, through its secretary general, myself,
Right. Okay.
stood and said that the tiff between the president and the judiciary is unacceptable. It bodes very badly for our system of democracy.
Yep.
That in fact, we implore the president. You see, I
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
the constitution. I understand the process through which we went to get to the point where we are. We said during the CKRC, and if you read the report, I want to encourage people to read things. If you read the CKRC report, it says we only retained that appointing power with the president out of deference for his position.
As
But
head of
the
state.
appointing of judges is still with the JSC.
Exactly.
You see? And so what have we done? You know, we don't stick somewhere and say there's a problem. ODM proposed a mechanism, a self-executing mechanism for appointment of judges, so that we don't get stuck in this quagmire. We can fight forever, but Kenyans are waiting for justice.
Yep.
So you will see, and we hope that the BBI team will incorporate ODM's proposal, that if in 14 days we have given the president names and he doesn't appoint them, it executes itself just the way that laws in parliament
Are
execute
self-executing.
themselves.
And Eric,
So we are a
7
party that
minutes
provides
before we let
solutions.
you go.
Eric,
Ndu, you have your
Eric,
question.
All right,
allow me
let's-
just to
let's-
def-
no, no,
just half a
Wanjiroh,
minute to defend
you've asked
myself.
them
I've read
that you've read the documents.
I have read the document, and the point you've made is exactly why I don't support the document, because I think it evades, it allows Uhuru Kenyatta to evade his responsibility and the deeds he committed against this country in
What would we
2017.
rather
Okay.
do?
No,
I
no,
also
no.
want
Yeah.
to understand her. What would she do in our position?
So you've agreed with me.
Specific. No, I want to understand how you view things.
You'd have-
What would you do if you were us?
I think it's high time we drew the line around the transgressions of the president.
What is
and
drawing a
insist,
line?
And insist he steps down. I think the BBI is a very long around way of saying the president has committed these violations, so everybody is culpable. Let us all
1-0.
go on a national confession.
So this is
So
one. This is
that
one
is my
perspective.
view.
That is
So-
one
so I have
perspective.
read
It doesn't
it,
have to
but
be
I
their
don't
perspective.
agree
Not
with
only
it.
that, but how long did ODM say the very thing that she's saying?
Yeah, they
She's
should have
drawing
continued to
a
say it.
line. We swore in another president.
No,
You
no,
are
no.
talking to people who actually do
Excuse
things.
me.
We don't deal in the
Yeah, I don't buy
abstract.
you.
What is
Okay,
drawing a
I
line?
don't-
Let's talk
I
about
Final
don't
question.
buy you.
Let's
Final
talk-
question.
Let's
Final
talk
question.
about
7
let's talk
minutes.
about doing things. Let's talk about conduct. Let's talk about social issues now
Correct.
in the party. All right. Recently, and has been about 6 months ago, a member of your party
Correct.
is alleged to have shot an individual.
Yes.
Right. DJ Evolve. Right. Thereafter, we've seen quite a lot of things come out in the media of what he was purported to have said, this, that, the other thing. And I'm asking
Yes.
about conduct and discipline for the party, for its
Yes.
members.
Yes.
Where do you stand on that in terms of reining in members who may be seen to have been errant?
Yeah.
Or where do you take a position
Yeah.
or a stand very clearly
Yeah.
when it comes to matters of discipline, especially for somebody who is a leader?
I knew you'd bring that up because it is part of the example of the outrage industry that I was talking about. Babu is accused of committing a crime.
Yep.
Now, when you are accused of committing a crime, that is beyond the realm of a political party. We are a political party. We do political things. If you step out, for instance, now, I have come here in my capacity as SG. But if I decide to assault you now, that is not the SG of ODM. That is Edwin Sifuna as an individual. Criminal culpability rests upon an individual. There is no collective culpability for criminal conduct.
No.
Number two, ODM is subject to the law. ODM is subject to the constitution. We cannot advance against a member of a party against his constitutional rights. ODM is also subject to the presumption of innocence. So if you give me a guilty verdict, and I'm surprised, there are members of other political parties who have actually been found guilty of serious crimes.
Yep.
Nobody's talking
Of
about
fraud.
those ones. I've not seen anyone asking Tuju why he has not expelled Waluke. Because everybody understands that these things are
I've actually been trying to get Mr. Tudu to come into the studio just as an example.
If you read the code of conduct of ODM, there are things that are within the purview of the party that if you do certain things, the party can take disciplinary action against you.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you do
Social
certain
sanctions.
things that then are outside the purview of the party, for instance, things that to do with criminality, theft,
Right.
ESCC comes in, they are governmental agencies, and then you have those constitutional protections.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. There is a constitutional protection called right to be heard. Senator Malala was expelled recently, in quotes, by ANC.
Yep.
Do you know why the expulsion was rejected? Just because they didn't give him an opportunity to be heard.
To be heard.
There is another constitutional protection called presumption of innocence. Innocent till proven guilty. Immediately the court is done with Babu Owino and they say that he is guilty of the acts that he is accused of. Then as a party and as a public,
The
you have a right to
mechanism
now
kicks in.
ask ODM to do something on the basis of a finding of a court of law that
okay.
something has been committed.
So essentially
but
what
what I don't agree with, somebody committed a crime. He was arrested for that crime. He was charged for that crime. He is in court. He was given bail, which you passed in your own constitution, saying everybody, including murder suspects, should get bail. Then some TV station wakes up one morning and decides, oh, we are going to generate outrage. And then people expect ODM to respond to manufactured outrage.
Oh, so
Actually,
it's
I don't.
ridiculous.
No,
Kenyans
Edwin.
aren't
It's
out-
ridiculous.
Edwin, in this case,
And
I
then
don't
there is
expect.
also-
No,
just a
hold
minute.
on. No,
Let
Edwin.
me finish.
I don't
Let me
expect. I
finish.
don't
There is
expect
also- there
ODM
is
to
also a rule.
respond to that
There is
outrage.
also a
I
rule called
expect.
the
I'm
sub
asking.
judice
Listen to the
rule.
question.
Edwin,
Yes,
Edwin,
let me
Edwin,
finish.
hold on.
Then
Let me-
I know the question.
No,
you want to
no,
ask.
you
You don't know
don't.
the
You don't.
question.
Just hold on.
Listen to the question.
In this case, I don't expect ODM to respond to outrage. I expect ODM to respond in terms of what an individual is now purporting, even after the fact.
No.
Integrity,
Integrity,
leadership.
Let me tell you this.
integrity,
Let
and
me tell you
discipline.
this.
That's
Let-
where
let me
I'm
tell
going
you
with
this.
this. The
Party
outrage,
discipline.
Let me
the
tell you this.
outrage
Party
aside,
discipline.
A
the
political
outrage
party,
aside.
just a
Party
minute.
discipline,
A political
public
party
conduct.
is not a nanny. Edwin Sifuna, if for instance, when I leave my office as the SG of ODM, I go into a bar. I'm drinking there with harlots, whatever it is I want to do. That is not ODM. ODM cannot come and tell me how to live my life. Sifuna, you only need to marry 3 wives.
the
You can only have
Constitution.
2 concubines. That is not the power of the party. And in fact,
Conduct of a
listen,
public officer,
I am a
state
lawyer. You
officer.
should benefit from my knowledge when I'm here. The institution that is mandated under law to police public officers is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. And because it has failed, what have we done as ODM? We have proposed the formation of an independent authority to police public officers.
Okay, let's
Because
come
the
back-
EFCC
let's
have
come
failed.
back to
Let
this
me just make the
individual
point on sub judice. Sub judice means once a matter is before a court of law, what are you doing discussing its merits in the media? Just respect the rule of law, just the way that you want us to protect the Chief Justice. Can you protect our court system by ensuring that justice is done? Let me tell you what usually happens in the US in trials that relate to the jury. Yeah, the jury is filtered from amongst people who are impassionate about the facts.
The facts.
People who probably, and when you want to poison a jury pool, that is what the media does. They poison a jury pool in such a way that the court has to go somewhere else where that media house has no coverage, just to get people who can be objective about the case. We are not helping DJ Evolve. When we play all these things in the media and social media, we as a party, first of all, commiserate with him. We are actually happy that he's been discharged from the office. When this from hospital. When this thing first happened, I issued a statement and I say,
yes, you did.
It's not as if the ODM has not spoken about these issues. We have spoken with it, but what we will not do is to respond every time there is an outcry. Outrage manufactured by a media house. Where is ODM?
Okay,
Where is
hold
ODM?
on.
Our work
So
does
in
not
this
involve
case,
just issuing
all right,
statements.
So in this case, you've talked about, again,
Yes.
a watch and see. Because what you've said is, okay, the process is going to play out.
That's the law.
That understood. And that is going to happen.
That's the law.
It is very clear.
Yes.
Hang on. What you said previously was that in the event that X or Y should happen, then you will take on that responsible role of either censuring this individual or guiding in terms of discipline. Is that what you're saying?
No, we said our code of conduct is very clear. Once you're found guilty of a crime, we will expel you from a party. It is not. You see, remorse is not taught in any school. Manners is something you get from your mother. You don't get it from your political party. Babu is a member of ODM in exercise of his right of association. I am sure he has exercised that right in other places. How is nobody asking why has Babu's church not spoken? He belongs to clubs. Why is people just look at his political party as if his politics is what informed his action? And I want to say this thing.
But that's where the power lies.
No. There's no
That's
power.
where his power
The guy
lies.
has been charged. We have seen members of parliament convicted. He has been charged. He has been given cash bail. They were very stringent cash bail terms. Then you get people in the media saying he's walking free as DJ Evolves. He's not walking free. He has been charged.
He's out on bail.
He's out on bail. Surely.
We knew we were going to have to bring this whole issue of, it's a matter that's still in court, but you went somewhere and you said, if you, Edwin Sifuna, Secretary General of ODM, went and misbehaved somewhere, then the party has absolutely nothing to say or do about your
This is my
your
personal
external behavior.
conduct.
We have seen in other jurisdictions in other countries
Yeah.
where, for example, a leading member of a political party, even a sitting member of parliament, is accused of even sharing
Infidelity whatever.
nudity and
or
such.
using a little public money
And
to
they are expected to
resign.
to step down
On their own.
and the party
Correct.
also
Puts
has
pressure.
a lot of pressure that it puts
No.
on this
Do you
particular
think
Let me
we
tell you-
need to
let me
raise
t-
the bar?
let-
Maybe
correct.
there's the law. Maybe, do you think...
Now you're understanding.
Can
Nishaona
we-
umeelewa.
Can the power... party
We
raise
need,
the bar?
as a country, this is the broader conversation of BBI. What is it? What is our national
Why are you
ethos?
waiting for
How is
BBI?
it? How
Why
is
not
it that
now?
you go to a House of Parliament in a European capital and it is bicycles that are parked outside and not V8s
Not
and
V8s.
V7s? How is it that when somebody even misconducts themselves in their private lives, they feel the shame that they cannot hold public office because I slept with somebody's wife, and they resign?
Our
So we
political
need
party-
to get there
Edwin, we
as
are
a country.
together.
Our
Edwin,
We need to
we are
get there,
together.
but
Completely
the truth
together.
of the matter
question
is,
is-
Our
we are not
political
there
parties,
yet.
our
So we
political
will get
parties
there
yet. We
as
will get there.
vehicles that
Edwin,
also
Maybe in our
Edwin,
lifetime, maybe not.
Edwin,
We will
why,
get there.
why do we have to wait for BBI, for ODM to do what it knows needs to be done now?
Which one? What
You
is
can
it that
lead
needs to be
socially.
done now?
You, as a
Those
party,
ethos.
you
Yeah.
can
You can practice those ethos.
Yes.
This is
You
what
see
I'm saying.
You
This-
know, values are actually
Values are
expressed. They are
individual.
lived. They are lived.
Values are not Yani, it is up to you as an individual.
Let's talk about
to decide
integrity.
that this is what you are going to do.
No,
this is
values are
wrong.
not individual. Values
No,
are
it's-
community, but then they are practiced by
Edwin,
individuals.
an individual.
Edwin.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's practiced
There
by
are things
individuals,
that
but
you,
Eric,
you can
it's an
do
expectation
that
of a
probably
community.
she wouldn't do.
Eric, can I say one of the disappointments I had with the BBI is, of course, many of the recommendations it makes are either provided in law and have not been implemented because Parliament has not done what it's supposed to do. And this is an example of one of the difficult areas about who is going to be the first to live out integrity. So I'll put the question again to you. Why has the ODM party not sat down and instituted those internal measures to ensure that the conduct of their members of or their political representatives meet the constitutional threshold? Because the bit that we are missing, and this is what BBI says, is the social. And who is going to start? Even when we pass that document, we will still be the very same people. But you have an
Answer that
opportunity
one.
now.
That's what I'm
Final
saying.
question of the
That's
day.
what I'm saying, Wanjiru. It is society to have a conversation about itself. Who are we as a people? We passed a constitution that
My
has.
question, I
No, let
agree
me
that.
answer the question.
Why is the
If
party
you don't want me
not-
to answer the question, I'll just stop talking.
Get straight to the answer.
Yeah. The truth of the matter is, we passed a constitution that has a chapter on leadership and integrity.
Exactly.
We are the same people who defiled that and made sure that it doesn't matter what somebody is accused of. Your current president and deputy, when they were elected, what were they facing?
The two.
Far more grievous charges than what Babu Owino is facing.
Don't compare.
It's
don't
the
compare.
truth.
Thank you
Don't
very
compare.
much,
A life
Edwin
is a
Sifuna.
life.
Thank you for coming to the show today, for sitting on the hot seat. We expect you to come back again soon, right?
Always,
And,
you
and
know,
before
you're
that,
neighbours down the road.
just down the road.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll speak with your chairman and your parliamentary leaders from ODM.
Thank you.
To talk about these issues of budget and the oversight role that ODM is playing in the House.
Thank you.
Asante sana.
Asante.
You're a good man.
Si niseme kitu moja ya COVID.
Sema.
Unajua watu wapendi kupeana credit mahali it's due.
So you want to,
We have,
you want to give yourself.
We have shortcomings as a party. People will always look to, only the negative. People have given plaudits for how some of our members have managed the COVID crisis.
Do you want
in
to
their
take
areas.
credit here or something? Just
I am taking credit for how we have handled the COVID crisis in Mombasa.
How have you?
In
So,
Mombasa?
yeah. So you should be able to say that there are places where you fall short, but there are things that you do well.
So what
What
are
are the
you doing?
lessons?
What is this thing that you've done in
Maybe I was
Mombasa?
taking credit.
What are
and
the
because
lessons?
because Joho is
I have
is
taken
an
the
is
credit.
ODM.
What are the
Without-
lessons?
without-
What are the
Done.
lessons?
Through the
Thank you
governor
very
of
much.
Mombasa.
It's a situation room is Kenya's biggest conversation, 20 minutes after 9. Well, Edwin Sifuna has been with us since 8 o'clock. Secretary General of ODM Party. Keep it right here. The conversation continues. Let's take a look at the weather.
Nominating people.
Okay, let's look at Nairobi, where we'll see highs of 22 and lows of 12 today, with showers in the afternoon are what are expected. Nyeri at 17 degrees is mostly cloudy. We'll see rains in the afternoon with highs of 22. In Nakuru, rains expected later also with highs of 22. And in Eldoret, highs of 18 and lows of 12 with showers expected later. Let's take a look in Kisumu, where at 21 degrees is mostly cloudy. We'll see showers in the afternoon with highs of 26 and lows of 11. In Kakamega, it's mostly cloudy as well. Highs of 22 with showers in the afternoon and then with lows of 14. Malindi at 26 degrees is mostly cloudy. We'll see rain showers later with highs of 28 and lows of 24. Seems like the entire nation will be cooled down later. All right, let's step into Kampala, where in the afternoon as well, 24 degrees the high and lows of 18 with showers later on. In Dar es Salaam, the rain continues to come down. We'll see thunderstorms later with highs of 28 and lows of 23. Take a brief look into Joburg at 8 degrees. Highs of 17 and lows of 6 with sunny conditions all through the day. And in Lagos, the thunderstorms continue to come down. We'll see highs of 27 and lows of 23. Let's take a last look into Europe then, where in London, the rains have continued and they will continue well into Thursday with highs of 19 and lows of 15. And then in Paris, it's clear skies all through, sunny conditions at 16 degrees. We'll see highs of 27 and lows of 16. Getting round to 2 a.m. on this morning in New York, cloudy conditions all through, and they're likely to wake up to a rainy day with highs of 29 and lows of 23.
Okay, 23 minutes after 9, the situation room, the conversation continues. In the room this morning is C.T. Muga, Wanjiru Gikonyo, Nduoko, and Eric Latif. So let's talk about the big headline in the papers today. The big announcement came from the Ministry of Education yesterday. Mass school repetitions. So basically what Professor Magoha came out to announce is what has been in the public domain for a while. The question is whether to reopen schools in September for everybody, to reopen schools in September for the candidates, especially the candidate classes in the basic education, that is standard 8s and Form 4s, and then allowing the colleges and tertiary institutions to reopen as well, or to just extend the stay-at-home order for until the end of the year, until some part of next year, when the numbers start stabilizing in the country in terms of infection rates. And then he came out and said yesterday, there was the proposal, which was that let's allow the candidates to come back to schools in September so that they can sit their exam towards the end of the year. That was met with a couple of challenges. If only the candidates come back to school, the standard 8s and the Form 4s, and then everybody else is still at home, it means that the standard 8s will be ready to transition to Form 1, but the Form 1s will not be ready to transition to Form 2. So you'll have 2 Form 1 classes next year. This is adding another 1 million people, because there's a 100% transition policy, adding an extra 1 million into Form 1 next year to meet the 1 million that are Form 1 this year. That is going to be a challenge. The Form 4s, if they leave, they are less than 1 million. And even if you move everybody up, you still have space that has not been filled. So their solution was basic education, extend the year, let everybody repeat next year. Where they were at near the close of the first term, because they had not even finished the first term of the syllabus, let's just start from there next year, and just assume that this year is gone. COVID, this is one of the effects of the COVID pandemic. Of course, and we were discussing this earlier when you were looking at the newspapers and reviewing the newspaper headlines. It brings in so many issues of, okay, so was this the best way to go? Is this the right thing to do? What do you make of this?
It's a cop-out.
Why?
It's taking the easy way out. You have an entire institute of curriculum development who think through such matters. The ministry had an opportunity to deal with distant learning through the means available to us in this country. Very little has been done to actually even put into practice what may have been developed by the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. Now, if you look at what the minister then proceeded to say, is a culmination of their ineptitude that began way back, not this year, not with COVID, long before COVID, ensuring that certain things are in place so that the learner is prioritized and it is ensured that the learner actually gets to learn. And the story about people not covering the syllabus, there are many, many schools, especially in the urban areas, who have access to internet provisions, who have been learning from day one, and they have been going through the syllabus. And then there's the consequences and the impact that this will have on the parents and the understanding. Because the thing that comes to mind immediately, you're going to ask parents to pay fees for another year, a complete year, again.
What do you mean again? They haven't paid a complete year.
Oh, yes, they have been paying.
Who has been paying school fees? Magoha has been saying through and through, no school fees is to be paid this year.
But some people
because
are in the
there's no
practice
second
at the
term,
beginning
there's no
of the
third term.
no, but at the beginning
People
of the year in January,
pupils have been learning,
people, look, there's some people though
if
who
you've been
do
paying
pay
for
fees.
private tuition, that is
No.
private tuition.
Wait,
Don't call it school fees.
Eric,
there are people
is
who
it
pay
possible
fees
to
for the
understand
whole
what is
year?
actually going on?
In January, there are people who pay fees for the whole year.
Okay.
And this is the question that has arisen. Now, if this entire year is going to be scrapped, what then happens to those fees that they have paid? It's a
It's
genuine.
moved to the next year.
Yes.
We spoke to the Secretary General of the Private Schools Association, for instance, and he said that is what's going to happen. If you've paid school fees, as far as the Private Schools Association is concerned, schools stopped operating on the 15th day or the 16th day of March.
Eric, schools didn't stop operating. This is what I'm trying to tell you. That there has been e-learning and students have been covering the syllabus and fees has been paid. I am not guessing. I am telling you, I'm stating this as a fact.
All right. The fact is what is happening on the ground. And I'm also giving you the fact that the Ministry of Education has said over and over and over again. The CS for Education has said, and even the director of the KICD has said, where we were at in the syllabus, you are the teacher. You know, the syllabus spells out what is going to be taught every month, every week, till the end of the year. Where we were at in the syllabus on the 15th day of March, this is where we still are in the syllabus. We are not progressing with syllabus development.
And I'm telling you that schools have been progressing.
Yes. And the ministry itself has said, we are not progressing. As far as the government has instructions is people are at home.
Now you understand what I'm telling you. That is the easy way out.
If there is, and we also know that KICD is rolling out these programs are considered revision programs to keep the students occupied in terms of you need to revise. They are not progressing with the development of the issuance of the syllabus. That's the status. So yes, the truth is there are some schools that have been helping the communities, that's pupils and the parents, by engaging the students, by going online and offering some programs. And we're talking about the 844 system, right? The national system. Those that have been doing that are doing that. It's like tuition.
Eric, in many public schools in this country,
right now,
75% of the fee is actually paid in the first term. The second and the third term, you pay in infinitely
so this is in private
amounts.
schools.
No,
even in public schools.
Public schools.
As far as public schools is concerned, the government has already said this. School fees, if you paid for third term, there is no third term.
Eric,
Magoha said the other day, in fact,
Eric,
George, you can get that clip, George.
I do understand what Magoha said.
He said,
is this not the same Magoha, Eric, who also said
I went to
that
Starehe.
he was going
He said the other day, I went to Starehe, and I don't know what school he went to. I have said many times before that we have never gone to second term. He said that. And if you keep reminding me about second term, he told that reporter who asked him, Shindwe no Shindwe kabisa. He has said many times, we have never gone to second term.
The good
that
professor
is
said many
KICD and the ministry, as far as they are concerned, their order and instruction is very clear. Stop everything in terms of syllabus issuance or syllabus, what is it called, teaching, at 15th of March.
I think
so kama umekuwa ukilipa wewe uliza mwalimu.
I think, for me, I also agree, with that fees is not necessarily the bigger overriding issue, because that can be dealt with.
Yeah.
The bigger question is it justified for kids to stay home for a whole year, for another 2 terms? And I agree with what CT says. It's a cop-out, and it's a gross failure of our education system, and of education policy. Let's put it that way. And it really, like we were saying earlier, demonstrates the extent to which our political leaders have used education as a tool. And I go back again, and it seems a trivial issue, but when the Jubilee Party said we're giving laptops, what were they implying? They were implying that we are going into e-learning, and the competency-based curriculum and all these changes are supposed to be taking us into an education of the future. Now, the education of the future is based on technology. They got that right. So why have they not taken that step? And I just think the government is not serious about education. I think they are copying
That was a campaign tool.
Well, even if you went through the manifesto, it was a campaign tool, but the idea of revising the thinking is about getting our education into...
campaign tools are not necessarily practicable, or neither do those practitioners of those particular sentiments actually believe that they're actually going to implement them.
No,
when they try to, it's tokenism.
No, but you can't really say that, because because we have the CBC reforms. CBC is supposed to be preparing Kenyan students to compete globally. That's the whole thinking behind it. And we are smack in the middle of implementing the CBC. And the skills-based curriculum actually should be very easy to teach.
Are we saying that right now our students cannot compete globally?
I think we need to go back. The emphasis of CBC, if you want to look at it, is for learners to imbibe and ingrain education, so that they are expressing the knowledge that they have then put in. Whereas they move from a system whereby they had to memorize everything for the sake of passing an exam. CBC was clear that it is now for you to be able to express the knowledge that you have put in. So on that point, then all these other things about being able to participate globally come as a byproduct of all of these other things. But it was now putting all of that well into practice. And I think we just need to be very clear on now the change between now 844 and CBC.
Right. So the point that I'm making is that a government that is in the process of transforming our education system, you know, a fundamental change in line with making us globally competitive, cannot then afford to say, oh, we are unable to consider how we can implement e-learning. So it is a cop-out.
This global competitiveness.
Yeah.
Would you ask that question after we do traffic?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
27 minutes after 10, 27 minutes to 10 a.m. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads and then continue this conversation. And this time, we'll ask you to participate. 0719 012 600.
Nothing much. It's actually quite better than what we saw it an hour ago. So it looks pretty good, guys. Right, most parts of Nairobi, we still have a little bit of dregs from early morning traffic on Thika Road and also on Mombasa Road. But getting onto Uhuru Highway or then onto Langata Road shouldn't be too bad for us today. So it looks good. It's opened up, and we'll see what it looks like later on in the day. But for now, you're good to go.
Traffic.
All right, so we continue this conversation just as we went to this break. City Buga had a question. And the conversation is on the ability of the education ministry, basically.
No. You see, there's when Jiro keeps talking about this global competitiveness that the new system is supposed to
enhance
or bring about, and I don't understand it. What is this thing that is going to do that will make us more competitive than we currently are? Or are you saying that we're not competitive currently?
The point I was making before we go into the merits or demerits of the present education system is it legitimate for government to announce to write off the 2020 academic year? And I feel it's a cop-out. What should they have done? Number one is they should have told us, they should know, because they do, the minimum learning outcomes are these. And they should have then found, how do we assist students wherever they are to attain these minimum learning outcomes? And the point you are making, CT, is there's a large number of students, and it might be as many as 80%, maybe 70%, who can be reached using various online platforms. And then there are those who can't be reached. And that's where now they would have to get creative and think, okay, how do we reach these children with the minimum learning outcomes?
How long would that take?
Then what's the funding that would be needed? That's what should have gone into the budget. And then with regard to exams, I think the thing to do with exams, again, is to say, what are the minimums? What have people done? How do we examine this class? You can't examine them the way you normally do. So I put it to you that our education system is too rigid. And it is about itself. And, you know, the minister says, oh, everyone's obsessed with exams. I'd say even the ministry is obsessed with its own system. And it's not thinking about the knowledge it imparts.
So let me ask you a specific question, Wanjiro.
Yeah.
You're saying that they could have thought about this. So
they could have done this.
It is 3 months since the schools were closed. How long would it have taken for them to look at, okay, so schools are closed. We are in the middle of just starting to roll out CBC. Our program for digital, whatever, the laptops took off and flopped somewhere. This is where we are. This is our reality. How long would it have taken for the Ministry of Education to come up with a new alternative to learning and roll it out and ensure that the learning that has been set out by experts of education at KICD, this is what we expect people to learn in this year, is still covered?
Well, I think in other jurisdictions, what they've done is look at those basic minimums, because when you do curriculum development, you do have your learning targets. So it wouldn't be just Kenya, but the other countries that have already looked at what are the basic minimums. We're not going to examine this class, but we will look at maybe whatever coursework had been done. We
An
will
example of a country?
Well, okay, if you look at the British system, that's what they've done.
So what did they do?
In South Africa, because
we're talking
that may
about
be
two
more
things. There's the first thing of the content, and then the second part of the dissemination of that content. Right?
So our problem is not content.
It's on the other side of
on
the dissemination of the content.
And that is where I will go
And the
back and say...
infrastructural challenges. So how long would it have taken to sort out those infrastructural challenges?
I am sure because of and this is where I was saying, because of the laptop project and because of the CBC, I am sure they have some sort of plan around e-learning, because there is no way you would have implemented the laptops without having done an assessment. Government, by the way, generates policy. And where it falls apart is at implementation.
Yep.
Right? So we'll make an assumption. Number one, they have thought about e-learning. And if they haven't, by the way, if you get stakeholders into a room, there are schools that are using e-learning. Yes, there are Kenyan system schools that are using e-learning as we sit. The limitation is the resources.
What is the infrastructure required for e-learning?
Right. Now, that is where they would sit and look at what do we have within our purview and do an assessment. And I would put it to you, and this is the point I was making, that there's a whole battery of households that have access to e-learning. Because right now, if you look at maybe...
they constitute a really small number of the population.
The majority of the population
the
actually doesn't
infrastructure
have
that we're
access.
talking about here. Is it internet access? Is
what
it
would
access
it be? I
to-
would
what is
say
it?
if you look at access to some level of smartphone as a basic minimum, you will be at a higher level in terms of access to content. When you look at laptops, I don't know, I haven't looked at those figures. But when you consider that a large percentage, maybe 60% of Kenyans live in some in urban, in some within an urban vicinity.
60% are in urban areas.
Right. By the way, Kenya is quite a highly urbanized.
60%?
It's just
So why is it that
maybe
we'll be talking about
some level.
a huge percentage of our population living in urban areas by 2035? That means that we have not gone beyond.
Actually, if you look at they live in urban areas, I said some sort of, I can't remember what that statistic is. Kenya is actually quite has a high number of people living in urban areas, and this is just because of employment opportunities.
Okay.
The problem is they come into urban areas and live informally in urban areas. So we don't have the urban facilities.
Yep.
But in terms of being within the vicinity, there's quite a high number. So I do not buy the argument that we write off a whole academic year. I would say you've got radio, very high penetration. You've got USSD, maybe not that usable. You've got village structures. Maybe we would have activated the community, the village-based structures of maybe dropping off learning materials. If we put our mind to it, we cannot say that we are not able to give basic learning targets to students for an entire year. I don't buy that. Not this far into our development. Not as a lower middle income country. No,
And
that's
you
a
think
cop out. That's
would
a
have
lack
been
of
able
priority.
to do that with all the infrastructural challenges that we have and still meet those minimum thresholds, even local and international thresholds of the kind of education that you've given to the students, and said in this particular year, because a majority of the months in the year are the ones that are spent at home or when you're fighting this COVID, we actually managed to pass out education, to inculcate education to this degree, and we met our threshold.
Yeah.
Of saying that this is what
you're starting with infrastructure challenges.
Because that is what it is.
No. I put it to you. Our first challenge is that is a rigid way of thinking and is a lack of resources because the priorities are elsewhere. We have resources. It's the same way we were saying, how do we target vulnerable households?
What would those resources be going to address? Infrastructure. I'm starting from that point because that is where we are.
No, but infrastructure
Many
could be
people,
at
many
the
people,
local level.
even within Nairobi,
Okay.
more people who don't have access to internet.
Let's be practical, because we don't have a policy document, we don't have an education. Let's look at my village, where my husband comes from, and how the houses are spread. If you have a teacher in that area, and that teacher has access to the internet, how can that teacher then assist the students with some basic learning targets? Those are the kind of questions we should ask. Then you note their chiefs, their village administrators, government is present in all these areas. So if we were able to set basic minimum learning standards and say, okay, maybe children should be reading books, they should be doing basic maths, they should do some drawing, and then you kind of escalate that. You move out of the idea that you have to cram 5-10 chapters of 10 different subjects. Basic learning outcomes that you say, what is the basic skills?
Like that, I guess that's what KICD, for example, is doing with the radio and TV programs, right? So it's saying we escalate that, but still, that would be revision.
No, but you're only thinking about examination class.
Not examination
even
class.
teaching
Everybody,
new subject material
you will
also.
not be able to introduce a new concept through that method.
Well, I'm not
Mwalimu,
an educationist.
would you?
I'm not an educationist, but people
You're
are doing
you're
virtual
talking
learning.
about Pythagoras theorem.
Wanjiro's
remotely.
suggestions are highly theoretical. I was going to ask her, can she name one country where what she's suggesting has actually worked?
A country like ours that has that doesn't have the online infrastructure.
Yes,
Because
I mean, the
learning is
suggestions
happening
you're
online.
making-
Learning
See-
is happening online, and if you
But
have
it's a minority of people in this country who are able to access that information, that learning. A minority.
Yeah, but if we are to use that, we are saying a minority of people work in the formal sector. A minority of people have the income. That's the problem we have. So COVID has shown the problem. So should government not have raised its ante and said, how do we use this opportunity to address digital learning? For me, I feel it's a cop-out to the extent that they are not championing, at least saying we're going to...
The cop-out didn't begin with COVID.
The COVID is exposing
what has existed
for a
all
long
along.
time.
Yes.
And I agree completely. My feeling is that the government would not have been able to come up with solutions and adequately address the issue of education within this time.
And one of the big reasons for that is that because throughout, the system had not been tweaked so that it would be able to take something like this. The countries that we keep talking about, and quickly adapt. The countries that we've been talking about, where online learning has continued. Why did that happen for a country like Finland? Why was it so easy for them to do this? Because the system had already encouraged and allowed some kind of digital learning to take place in the home space. Yeah. So this was not a far cry from reality for them because they already knew it. So now when schools were shut down and they said, okay, this learning is going to continue, guess what? It was something that they had already been doing for years.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. The system, the system, not just the top layer of things, the system from deep within needs to change. We need to look at a different way of doing things, not just to say, let's prepare for a pandemic, but let's have it so that that is the way in which things are going to be done anyway. So if something comes and rattles you, you don't go off course completely or have to shut things down completely. You can just take a different trajectory and move on with the same kind of learning.
Indeed.
Yeah.
At 13 minutes to 10, let's go back to the KPA and look at the Captain Cargo, which is an information portal by the Kenya Ports Authority, www.kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo, and cargo is K-A-R-G-O. We've been helping CT Muga move a consignment that's coming from Guangzhou, China, to arrive at the port of Mombasa. Now it's at the port of Mombasa. So basically on Captain Cargo, if you go to Captain Cargo, you'll find a tab that's on import and gives you the information that you require, that you need to know when you are importing goods. There are 16 steps. We've been going through the steps. Now we're in the final 3 steps. That's step 14 to 16.
Right. So, you've made the payments. The agents have made the payment for you. So you've made the payment. It's just that somebody has done it on your behalf. So when they say KRA pays, it's CT who has paid, right? But KRA is facilitating this for you. So then your agent submits a pickup order after all of this has been done to KPA. So that, again, the documentation is clear, it's done, it's paid for, and they pay the port charges. You pay the port charges. The truck arrives at the port entry gate, issued with a position slip. 1, 2, 3. Finally, the truck proceeds to the yard and it's loaded with the cargo, precious agricultural implements from Gwangju. And thereafter, you get a gate pass issued and you're on your merry way out of the port.
What if I want to use SGR?
You just direct it to the SGR.
SGR. If you want to drive it, CFS is not working as such. But SGR can take your stuff to Naivasha.
Thank you.
What do you want your cargo? Naivasha, Nairobi, Inland Container Depot?
No, I don't come from Naivasha.
So Nairobi is okay?
No, farm implements in Nairobi. What on earth
You want
am
to
I
take
going
it to
do?
Muhoroni?
Yes.
Okay, so they'll
now
go
from
to Naivasha
Naivasha
and then truck
Truck
Muhoroni.
to Muhoroni.
No, the idea of the truck from Mombasa works better.
You like that one?
It works better.
But can you see how
That's a
from
political
Gwangju
position as well.
to Mombasa,
Why
for you.
political?
things are seamless?
Wajiro will see the political side of
Yes,
it, of
there
course.
is.
Even the farm implement, she'll be like,
No,
why
no,
are
no,
you
farm
importing
implement-
farm implements?
from
Yeah,
You should be
yeah,
getting
but
them in
politics
the-
is a part of our
This
life.
president should have
But
ensured that we have
politics-
farm
But
implements
where's the politics in choosing a truck?
Politics is a part of
Because
our life.
it
as
makes-
opposed to SGR. Anyway, it's 11 minutes to 10 o'clock. Thank you very much. Let's take this quick break, come back to this conversation. Now, let's open the phone lines and take at least two calls, all right? 0719 012 600. What do you think of this move by the Education Ministry to say that the schools are not going to be reopened at all this year for basic education? That is from baby class all the way to Form 4. Okay. 0719 012 600. Good morning. Ten minutes to 10. Let's go quickly to the phone lines. First on the line is Dr. Simon Kigondu of
Spice FM.
Good morning,
Spice
Dr.
up your life.
Hey.
Online, mobile, and on radio. Instagram at Spice FM
Okay,
KE.
good. Zachary?
Hello?
Zachary?
Hey.
How are
Yeah.
you? Okay.
Oh, fine, thank you.
Simon, are you there?
Dr. Kigondu here.
Let's hear from Dr. Kigondu. Dr. Kigondu, how are you?
Very good.
Okay. Yes or no to this?
Yep. I have loved the discussion today, especially the Sifuna discussion,
Yep.
and now the discussion on education. I just want to make a quick thing. I think we cannot vilify the Ministry of Education for cancelling whatever they are cancelling or the techniques they are using, because it's a health issue. It's not an education issue. So it's just a vilification of the health system that we have always been fighting for, and it has not been put in place. And I think I did a tweet to Sifuna, and he was being asked difficult questions in what the BBI has done after the handshake. And I agree with Wanjiro that the BBI has removed the Health Service Commission. As we try to solve the health problem, human resource for health problem, the BBI is doing the opposite. It has removed
Okay,
the health
Kigondu,
service.
let me bring you back to this particular conversation. You're saying let's not vilify the Ministry of Education because we are dealing with a health pandemic.
Because it's a health pandemic, yes.
Okay.
And the health of, is it a health pandemic on its own or is it affecting people?
The action of the Ministry of Health is a precautionary measure for the children. What they are saying is that the children can't go back because we cannot guarantee the health and safety of our children. It's not that they won't cancel the...
Was it possible to roll out any other method of inculcating education to the children without them going physically to class?
Actually, the social issues that are usually discussed of both health and education are actually playing out very well during COVID. And a lot of the noise that we've been making about the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development is actually coming to pass. So we definitely, in my own opinion, the health system needs to be the education system needs to be overhauled.
Okay.
The mode of delivering education to our system, but we need a national conversation on what the purpose of education is. And if I may pick an example, I think we need to go the Finland way, but we need to be very clear on what the purpose of education for our children is. A lot of it is a stage of doing an exam to go to the next stage, so to speak. So we really need to redefine this and improve the health system.
Thank you, Dr. Kigondu. Let me pick this other one. This is Justus in Kilifi. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric and team. How are you?
We're fine, thank you.
Today I want to contribute as a parent. I'm in a unique situation. I have children in all the three levels, high school, university, and primary. Now, as a parent, I've had an interesting experience with them, all of them at home, during this time of COVID. But one of the very, very things I could like anybody before you call them back to school to assure me is that they'll be safe. We know the reality is that assurance cannot be forthcoming. It's not from the Ministry of Education. It's not just from the health sector. It includes even the transport system on the way, going on their way back to school. The second bit is about what I expect my kids to learn in school. The education system in Kenya or everywhere in the world is not just about content. It's also about interaction. It's about socializing. It's about learning the manners of staying with people. And as you go high from the primary school, you know your clan. When you go to high school, your range of contacts increases, and you also learn how to deal with that. And then, of course, university. In the current context, even if we talked about digital education, that arm will be lost. Especially at the low level, that arm of learning outside class, we don't have mechanisms to ensure it at the moment. Now, going back to what Wanjiro is saying, theoretically she's right, but in the practical terms, she's very far from the truth. And if you talk to educationists, people who understand education, at the moment, no country is actually prepared to 100% offer quality education in the context of COVID. Even the Finland you talk about, for a while they closed, they are going on back a little while, but that goes back to their system and the content of the education. The last point I want to make is about KICD and its place in our education system. KICD designs content. I happen to, I'm also a teacher. One of the things you learn from KICD is about instructional technology and content. So KICD, what they have done, they have packaged the content into the appropriate technology for it to be transmitted to the students. But they do not control the policy environment, the logistical environment within which that content can be delivered. And that is where the biggest problem is. And then lastly, our system, one stage builds on another. So if you focus on one, it's like when you're building a house with blocks. If you are doing one layer, the one above requires the one below to have been sufficiently done. So if you do it and the top is not being done, it means you will have two layers which are either on each other or besides each other. So for example, the simplest logic Professor Magoa gave, that if you do candidates in class 8, it follows that next year they'll be in Form 1. But we know my son who is in Form 1 is at home and they are not going to school. So the last thing I want to say is that without making the conversation too long,
those are very many
is that we need to be we need to be very practical, especially Wanjiko and team. They need to be very practical and calm down, especially focus on not the west side of Nairobi, the east side of Nairobi and the village, so that they can be able to demonstrate how those guys in the east side of Nairobi can actually keep learning.
And Kilifi as well. Thank you very much, Justus.
And
have a good day.
Well.
Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. We'll do more homework.
More homework.
Yes, this is worth looking a bit.
Revising.
I'll also do some homework.
Yeah. Just think about how would you introduce photosynthesis via USSD code?
Go out, look at the plants. Yeah,
this
especially
is
if you're in the village, you
so
have.
So SMS is
look at the plant,
out.
and then you give what is it you need to respond to so that you understand the process. Yeah. So I'll do homework.
Okay. Coming to the end of the show, thank you very much for tuning in today. The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Tomorrow we have more and more conversations. We'll be having a presidential hopeful in the studio. We'll also be having, who else are we going to be having when you're in the studio?
Tomorrow we have the CEO of the Council of Governance,
Yes,
who will come and speak to us about county response to COVID.
To COVID-19. Okay, so C.T. Muga, today's proverb, and I'll give us the context.
Well, I'm going to paraphrase it. Well, you have a choice here, okay? If you're incapable of being a mountain, then find one to lean on.
The original version flowed a little bit better.
Yes. I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm explaining.
Be a
it.
mountain or lean on one.
Yes.
In life.
Mountains act as, among other things, a clear point of reference for, you think about it societally, anything you can think of. Now, it's also considered immovable because it is immovable. But many things that are unshakable and things that are considered solid are often compared to mountains. So, if you take it back to the individual, anyone who represents something that you consider to be valuable and important, like a parent to children, that's the mountain. And so children will tend to lean on their parents because those are the individuals they consider to be that very, very foundation, the solid foundation that I'm speaking of.
Asante sana. Join us again tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and you can tune in on radio or you can watch online. That is because we know that you have access to
You're one of the what percent?
Yeah.
I have to check urban numbers.
Spice FM KE on all our platforms, and thank you very much for tuning in. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. See you tomorrow.